Hello, good evening, and good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. Today, we are doing episode 328. I hope everyone is doing great. And today, I'm going to discuss geopolitics as well as history. I'm going to take questions that you have asked in the comments with the hashtag Ask Abhijit. But before we get into that, let's see who all is there on the live chat. Live with us, I can see Nikhil, Sagnik Acharya once again, Drawing Sack 53282. Geopolitical Dubey is here from Indore. Good evening, sir. Really now, Miss Patel, namaste. Rekha Hamble, Jai Shri Ram, Uchiha J7E, Tanmay Deshpande, Kasta Jivana 6537. Sachin Yadav is watching live after a long time. Welcome back, Sachin Ji. Good to have you, sir. Brave Robot says meow. Meow. Somi0709. Surya Pratap is here from Kalinga. Namaskar Ji. Namaskar. Rahul Dunake, Namaskar Ji. Tanmay Deshpande, Brave Robot. Darshan Patil, Namaste Ji. Bharatiya Patriotic, Namaskar. Sriniram 3290. Hello. Devik Shriyan, Namaste. Really now, Miss Patel once again. Anand Pai's birthday. Well, happy birthday to you, Anand Pai. I wish you the best. Many happy returns of the day and the best of luck. Swami is here from Jaipur. Good evening. Samana Satish 0905. Hello. Tanmay Deshpande, Rahul Dulake, Ashish Chabra. Namaste ji. Mac 4J1U. Namaste. Darshan Patil. Namaste. Swapnil Mishra. Hello. Good to see you. Swami says, have I watched Braveheart? I have watched it a long time ago. Rishikesh Das Gupta. Abhishek Shukla Live. King Ritvik. Brave Robot. Pratik Pachauri. Hello. Abhay Singh, Vihang Kurane, King Ritvik the Great, Darshan Patil, Raghveer Singh, Ujwal, Arav Shah, Humanity Survives, Abhay Singh, Ash King, Ganymede from Marwar, Uncertainty Principle, Ganesh Sagar, Atharva Y1S, Brown Leprechaun, Laksh Dangi. Who else do we have? Ujwal is here from Assam. Good evening. Sujit Shanagonda, good evening. Arav Singh, SKR7733 is here from Dhaka, India. Well, good to see you. Good to have you. Bibek Chakraborty, Sandesh Nale, Raghuvir Singh, Suresh Siwach, Agni Varana, Om Bekerikar, hello, good to see you. Harshil Joshi, Rishikesh Kuba Sad. Hyphen is here. Harshil Joshi, Agni Varana, Bhaskar Bandit, hello. Kahan is here from Delhi. Rahul Dunake once again. And Kamal Parashar is here from Meerut. Ankita Kachap, good evening, ma'am. Good to see you. Kahan is here from once again Delhi and everyone else. Okay. That is enough of greeting everybody individually. I greet you all collectively. Thank you so much for being on the live chat. Vikram as well. And everyone else. Okay, so let's get going with the questions. Plenty of questions. Plenty of concern about how things are going these days. So where shall we begin? Shall we begin with the India-US trade agreement, trade deal, the supposed trade deal? Shall we begin with Epstein? Let's begin with Epstein. So what is the deal with this person, right? The question is this. The question is by Rushabh Tare. And Rushabh Tare is super concerned about the Epstein files. I mean, it's a very big development that we are seeing in the world, in the United States. So the question is, what are the Epstein files? Who was this evil and lowest man in humanity named Jeffrey Epstein? Many American elites like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, the Clintons, Howard Lutnick, that fella, various actors, various entertainers, musicians, scientists, and God knows who else are named in these files. Even Donald J. Trump and his family. The details coming out are horrific, to say the least. So if these files reveal such a dirty truth, why were they released? Do these files have any link with geopolitics, or do they symbolize more of the internal decay of the United States, right? First of all, who was this person? Jeffrey Epstein. Is he, I mean, who was he? If it is a was, if it's a past tense. So Jeffrey Epstein was an American financier, whatever that means. And he was a convicted sex offender. Okay. This fellow, Epstein, he ran a network of trafficking of women, of trafficking of underage girls, of various kinds of horrific exploitation and abuse of human beings. And Epstein was a very wealthy person, and he used his wealth, his properties, his islands, and his ranches, and his houses, and he used his social connections to recruit victims and to abuse victims. And he was first convicted, I think, in 2008 or 2009, on charges related to procuring a minor person um, for nasty stuff, okay, that sort of thing. And he was also indicted for, I think, sex trafficking or something in 2019. So he was a person with a long track record of being a horrific person, but a very well connected horrific person, and a very wealthy person. And he had his friends were the who's who of the United States. Professors, Noam Chomsky is involved in the Epstein files, and politicians, ex-presidents, international world leaders, Deepak Chopra, that hypocrite, that charlatan who pretends to be a Hindu but who's actually a converted Christian, that guy. You have film stars, you have all kinds of people on this. You have Elon Musk. You don't have Joe Rogan, apparently. You don't have Charlie Sheen, would you believe it? And so on. So that's Jeffrey Epstein. And he is said to have died in prison in the year 2019, apparently a suicide. And very few people supposedly believe that in the US. That's what one hears, right? So that is Jeffrey Epstein. Now, his right-hand person was his, girlfriend, I suppose, Ghislaine Maxwell. So she is a British citizen. She was Epstein's right-hand man or right-hand person, who was his chief facilitator, his chief fixer. She helped Epstein recruit and groom and traffic underage girls and various kinds of victims, girls, boys, whatever. And she was arrested in 2020, the year after Epstein supposedly died. And she was also found guilty of the same kind of offenses that Epstein was found guilty of. And she is currently in prison. I don't know how long the prison sentence is. You can look it up. But she has been sentenced to prison for her role in whatever Epstein was doing. So that is Epstein. That is his right-hand man or woman, Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, what are these Epstein files? Right? Is it one single document? It's not a single document. It's a whole bunch of different kinds of documents. You have FBI reports. You have US Department of Justice reports and records from multiple investigations into Jeffrey Epstein and the people around him. So what kind of documents do we have in the Epstein files? You have various kinds of evidence, okay? Legally admissible, potentially evidence from various investigations. There are the returns from search warrants. There are seized physical items. There are transcripts of interviews and summaries of interviews of various people. There are photographs. There are videos. There's electronic data. There are court records. There are flight logs from Epstein's private jets, private planes, okay? There are logs and records related to the people who came and went from his private island. There is Epstein's contact book. There are all the emails that Epstein received. There are all the emails that Epstein sent. There are financial documents. There are witness statements. There are statements from victims with pseudonyms. There's evidence connected to Epstein's residences, Epstein's properties. There's all these different kinds of overlapping sets of materials, okay? There are files from FBI investigations. There are files from the US Attorney's Office, case files. There are civil case records. There are materials from grand juries, and there are prison custody records, and God knows what kind of information, all kinds of records. All of this collectively, all this information collectively, which supposedly runs into millions of documents, all of this together is the Epstein files. And the US government has been going through these files and redacting files, obfuscating or hiding information, putting black marks over names and whatnot, supposedly to protect victims and people who have not been charged with crimes. So people whose names are, if they are redacted, they are either victims or apparently they are people who are not actually charged with any crimes. So they may look bad in the documents, but they have not been officially charged with crimes. That's why their names are redacted. That's what the US government says. So only some portions of the Epstein files have been released to the public under court orders. Okay. Um, and so it is said that about 3 million or so documents have been released, and they are available online with a lot of redactions. And apparently, at least 3 million documents more exist, if not more than that. And those have not been released to the public yet. So that is the Epstein files. All of this stuff put together, and a lot of people are saying that the redactions, they actually protect not just the victims but also some of the offenders. Apparently, it looks like. And that sort of thing. So that is the deal. That is the Epstein files. So Epstein, was he the evilest person in humanity, the lowest person in humanity? Not by a long shot. Epstein was simply a servant. Epstein was just a guy who played a small role in the activities of the rich and powerful in the US. He simply helped them get what they wanted. Epstein was, well, he was imprisoned in 2019. Apparently, he died in 2019, before the COVID thing started, right? But these elites, these American rich and powerful people, they have these proclivities for the more costliest things. So after Epstein was jailed and eventually he supposedly died, who has been providing what they need is the question. Do you think there was only one Jeffrey Epstein? Do you think there's no one around today who does the same things? So Epstein wasn't the lowest and evilest person in humanity. His clients were the lowest and evilest people in human existence. Okay? His clients are the evilest people. Jeffrey Epstein is just a tool that they used. And there are allegations that he was linked to this government agency or that intelligence agency or whatever. We don't know how true or false these claims are. Some of those could be plausible. Some of those could be, well, maybe speculation. I would not want to speculate. And sure, there is some kind of truth to some of these things, potentially. I don't know. So, if these files reveal such a dirty truth, why were they released? Well, court orders, apparently. And maybe it was time to throw some people under the bus, perhaps. Maybe the US establishment has decided that. Maybe it was time to pressurize some very powerful individuals. For example, the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Maybe it was time to pressurize him. Because one of the major figures whose name apparently figures hundreds, maybe thousands of times in the Epstein files is Donald Trump. He seems to be all over the place. Elon Musk also is there. He figures in that. Noam Chomsky, the great leftist professor, intellectual, he figures in that. And there's so many names, so many names. So why were these files released? So like I said, maybe it's time to, the US establishment decided that maybe some of these older people who are no longer relevant but who are still hogging the limelight and they still have this sense of importance, let's throw them under the bus and let's now behind the scenes promote newer people. Perhaps maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's about pressurizing some people who are still in power, like Donald J. Trump. One can only speculate why these were released right now. The other question is that these files were released, these documents were released by the Trump administration. Sure, under the orders of the courts or whatever. But how come the Trump administration release these files that have Trump's name all over the place? Is Trump no longer in control of his administration? Does somebody else control his administration? These are interesting questions that crop up as a consequence of the release of these files. Do these files have any link with geopolitics? Oh yes, they do, in a variety of ways. They do symbolize the internal decay of the US. They do symbolize the truth of the kind of people who rule the world in the United States. So the United States, it's clear that their rich and powerful people are all, apparently many of them are pedophiles, many of them are absolute, utter depraved people. Many of them are absolute monsters. Maybe the United States should be renamed Pedophilistan. So we now understand the US a little bit better. A nation that is founded on genocide and slavery, and now it is a land of pedophiles. And they like to lecture the world about morality and human rights and democracy. But their truth is that they are ruled by pedophiles and perverts and criminals and cannibals. Looks like all the conspiracy theories that people have been speaking about, looks like all of these conspiracy theories are true. Looks like Pizzagate is true. Looks like all these most outlandish conspiracy theories, looks like they're all true. So the worst things you could have imagined about the United States and the people who run the United States, thousands of people, looks like all of the worst things we could imagine are true. That's the kind of country this nation is. So yeah, clearly internal decay of the US. I mean, this is Western culture, my friends. This is American culture. The people who run the United States, they have a different set of rules that apply to them. Essentially, no rules, no laws apply to them. Laws only apply to the rank and file American, right? So laws don't apply to the rich and powerful in the US. And these people, their culture, which stems back to European culture, well, this is the culture: cannibalism, abusing and exploiting helpless children and babies, cannibalism, pedophilia. I mean, this is their culture. I mean, it's horrific to read about this. It's horrific to look into this. Absolutely ghastly. Harshit Khajuria says, if Epstein was as influential and connected as he was, and every other famous person, well, apparently, has been to his island and done whatever they did there, then why was only Epstein caught, and why was he the person that allegedly died in prison? Why was no one else prosecuted? Why did only Epstein get convicted in the first place, considering everyone else was in on it? Well, that's a great question. Was Epstein the fall guy? Was all the blame thrown on the shoulders of Epstein, and was it taken out in order to absolve everybody else? I mean, you have the names of all these people that figure so incredibly repeatedly in the Epstein files. What about these people? Why have they not been prosecuted? Why have they not been imprisoned or jailed or whatever? Why are these people still out there? Rich and famous and powerful people. Bill Gates, the kind of things that are being said about Bill Gates, good God. Why are all these people out there? The kind of things you read in random documents, it's the most horrific stuff that you can imagine. It's like things out of a horror movie. So why are the other people not imprisoned? Why are they not? Why has no action been taken against them? Well, I suppose we don't know which of these Epstein file documents, they are of various kinds, various types of documents. How many of these documents constitute legally admissible evidence? How many of these documents are not legally admissible? And even if the documents exist, do they actually constitute proof of guilt or proof of whatever? So that only lawyers can tell you, right? It looks like nobody's going to be prosecuted. Looks like that. Looks like everybody's going to go away scot-free. Only Epstein is going to be the fall guy, that sort of thing. It looks like that. So the US legal system, and every legal system in the world, it protects the rich and the powerful. Okay, not every, but almost every legal system in the world protects the rich and the powerful. Okay, I'm sure you are all familiar with various kinds of legal systems in various countries. Look around. Look at there's something that's said on paper, and there's another thing that is like the way the system actually works. And you'll find that very often in many countries, the legal system actually serves and protects the rich and the powerful and victimizes the poor and the ordinary person. So I suppose the US also seems to be this sort of thing. And that's why Epstein all the blame has been thrown on Epstein. He has been vilified, demonized. I'm not saying he was good. He was a monster. No doubt about the fact that Epstein was an absolute depraved person, an absolute monster. So they decided that he's clearly a guy who clearly is a monster. So let's put all the blame on him, and let's try and get everybody else off the hook. Perhaps I don't see anybody else, at this point in time, being prosecuted or put into prison. I mean, nobody has been. This hasn't happened with anybody else thus far, right? And how did Epstein get convicted in the first place? I'm not sure what the details are. The first conviction, the first time he was charged with whatever was in 2008, wasn't it? So he was charged in 2008 on trafficking of a minor or something, right? And eventually he was indicted in 2019, just 11 years after the first time. So all the people who were corresponding with Epstein in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way to 2019, These people knew that he's a convicted sex offender who is known for exploiting underage victims and all that, and still they were happy to go to his island, to go to his mansions and his ranches and his farmhouses or whatever, get on his on his jet planes. They knew what kind of person he was, and yet nobody is being prosecuted. So that's the United States for you. Maybe will someone be prosecuted in the future? Well, it depends. We'll see. We'll see about that. But right now, it's only Epstein, even though everyone else's name has come out. Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick, Trump's minion, the guy who keeps on disparaging India. That creep. I mean, see his involvement in the Epstein files. Ugh. Okay. Gaurav Phagre says, after seeing some of the leaked conversations, especially Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri trying to convince Epstein and other people to invest in India, do you think Epstein might be part of the deep state? And now the deep state is pulling the strings of Donald J. Trump by leaking all this in order to do something more favorable. Okay, about Hardeep Singh Puri, Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. So there are one or two documents in the Epstein files that have a mention or mentions of Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri. And if you read the document, you will see that Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri is trying to pitch Make in India to Epstein and his associates. I am not sure if Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri even knew what kind of person Epstein was. Let's say he knew, but let's say potentially that Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri in 2014 may perhaps have known what kind of person Epstein is, that he was convicted of whatever. But it was clear that Epstein was a highly powerful, highly connected person in the US. He knew everybody, right? So he's one guy, the point person for reaching out to everyone in the US. Why not use that? Doesn't the US use dictators all over the world? The Americans know that these dictators are monsters, and still they use the dictators to serve America's national interests. I suppose from that perspective, it was fine for Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri to reach out to Epstein and ask Epstein to reach out to other people on India's behalf and give this entire outline of what Make in India is and what Prime Minister Modi's vision for India is. That was completely above board. There's nothing dirty or whatever in it. So Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, his involvement is clearly something that's in line with India's national interest. So yeah, there's nothing untoward about that. I mean, that's the one clean interaction we see in the Epstein files. Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri going and saying, Make in India, please invest. That sort of thing. Now, could Epstein have been part of the deep state? Well, clearly. Whatever the deep state is. If it is the unelected, powerful people who essentially own and operate and run the US, well, Epstein was very much involved with all of them. No question about that. Yeah. So Epstein was an agent or a member or some kind of servant of the deep state. If somebody knew what the deep state is, Epstein clearly, most likely knew what the deep state is and who the people are. Now that the deep state is pulling Trump's strings of Donald J. Trump by leaking all of this in order to do something more favorable, yeah, possibly, maybe pressure. So Epstein definitely knew what the deep state is and who the members of the deep state are, for sure. Was he a part of the deep state? No, he was just a tool of the deep state. Okay, 3 questions about, once again, Epstein. Mrigankasekhar Biswas says, given the recent Epstein file leaks, ongoing legal controversies, tax frauds, and falling approval ratings around Donald J. Trump, do you see a real risk of political ouster of Trump? Does this signal a rupture between Trump and the US deep state? Samarth Pramanik says, we all know what has come out of the Epstein files. It looks like the US deep state is using the Epstein files as a pressure point to pressurize certain powerful persons around the world. What's my thoughts on the matter? Real Vladimir Putin says, Israel wants to do a regime change in Iran. For that, they will need US help. Is this Epstein files release, which includes Trump, also a way to pressurize Trump in attacking Iran? So real Vladimir Putin seems to be implying potentially that Israel controls a lot of things in the US and Israel has had these Epstein files released. Well, I don't know about that. Does this signal a rupture between the deep state and Trump? Is the deep state using the Epstein files as a pressure point to pressurize powerful people? Definitely. See, what is the deep state, first of all? Something I've spoken about in the past. Obviously, I don't know what the deep state is and who the members of the deep state are. But typically in every nation, there is an unelected, extra democratic, extra electoral power center of powerful people who remain in power and who essentially, to a certain extent, control what happens in the country from behind the scenes. And you can't remove them democratically or electorally. It's an unelected power center. So you have such power centers in most countries. In the United States, also, it's clear you have something like that. It could be the unelected establishment. It could be a bunch of 150 very powerful men who may not all be Americans, whatever. So you have something called the deep state for sure. And maybe the unelected bureaucracy, maybe it's a tool of these people, possibly. Now, is there a rupture between Trump and the deep state? I don't think there's a rupture between Trump and the deep state. Maybe the deep state wants to push Trump to do something. Maybe incentivize him more to do something. Maybe give him a bit of pressure so that he is a little more proactive in doing what they want. I think Trump is very much in line with whatever the deep state wants. He is their primary tool right now. He's their most visible tool. So Trump would not have come to power if he was not aligned with the objectives and agendas of the deep state. And what he's doing right now is carrying out the agenda of the deep state, clearly. So there's no, as far as I can see, there is no rupture between the deep state and Trump. But maybe Trump isn't able to achieve certain results that they would like to be achieved. And maybe they are just, giving him some extra incentive, extra motivation to get something done. Is Israel also involved in the deep state? Well, I can't say. I don't know. I don't know, obviously. Does the deep state want a regime change in Iran, and is Trump dragging his feet on that? Well, that's a possibility. But I obviously would not know for sure because I am not in the deep state. I don't know who the people are. I can only speculate. So definitely pressure on Trump. I don't think there's a rupture. The Epstein files can definitely be used to pressure as not just Trump, but even other people, even other world leaders whose names may have been leaked or revealed in the Epstein files. So definitely, it's something that can be used to pressurize various powerful people around the world, various politicians, various world leaders, various business people, and so on and so forth. Definitely, Israel. I don't know. Can't say. Really, now Miss Patel says, I recently read about the Tophets and child sacrifice ritual of Carthage and the Canaanites in Jerusalem. So in Carthage, you have the Phoenicians. In the Canaanites are near Jerusalem. Horrific. 20,000 urns found related to the so-called gods Baal and Moloch. Is it okay to ask about them? Also, we know of human sacrifice in our culture, in India, but who exactly were chosen for that? I have not found any evidence of children being involved in human sacrifice in India. Can you confirm it? I hope all the coconuts were adults. Okay. Tophet. So there was this. So this place called Carthage, it had this cemetery-like thing, which was called a Tophet. The Tophet, this word Tophet, is actually a word that is used, I think, in the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and it talks about a people called the Canaanites who used to live in the Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, that region, today's that region. And there was this place near Jerusalem where the Canaanites conducted these horrific alleged rituals in which they would pass children through fire to sacrifice these children to a god that was called Moloch in the Hebrew Bible. Now, this god Moloch, it probably is a euphemism for some other god. Maybe it is one of the Baal gods. Maybe it is Yahweh even. We don't know for sure. So this entity called Moloch is the focus of these allegations in the Hebrew Bible of these horrific practices of passing children through fire to propitiate the god or gods or whatever. And it was the Canaanites who were people who lived in this region, in the Israel, Palestine, Lebanon region. They are the ones who are alleged to have been practitioners of child sacrifice. Now, the Canaanites, they kind of were ancestrally related to the later people called the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians are the people who lived in Carthage, right? Punic people, the Phoenicians. And Carthage is North Africa. So let's go to the map. Do we have a map? Yes, we have a map. So let me now talk about the regions that we are talking about. Okay. Because we are dealing with talking about Jeffrey Epstein and all, so let's look at the matter from a historical perspective as well. So when we talk about the Canaanite people, okay, we're talking about people who lived in this region, Israel, Palestine. Palestine is obviously not a country, but whatever, and Lebanon, and the coastal region of Syria, and even the western parts of Jordan. All of this, this is called the, what is it called? It's called, yeah, yeah, this region essentially. The eastern uh, shore of the Mediterranean Sea, essentially. So the Canaanite people, they lived in this region. We're talking about maybe 2000 BC or something, maybe 1500 BC, around that time. And near Jerusalem, there was, where is Jerusalem? Jerusalem is here. And somewhere near Jerusalem, there was this place where these Canaanites practiced this horrific set of rituals. And that place was called Tophets. And later, you have the Phoenician people who set up Carthage. Okay, Carthage was based out of Tunis. Was it? I'm sure it was Tunis. Let me find it if I can, without using the search feature in the map. Am I able to find it? Am I able to find? This is not Carthage, historical Carthage. Give me a second. Here we have it, the archaeological site of Carthage, the Punic ports of Carthage. You see this? This is the ancient harbor of Carthage, the ancient port of Carthage. And you have the theater of Carthage, ancient amphitheater of Carthage. And where is the Tophet of Carthage? There we have it. So this is the place where in Carthage, apparently, the most horrific things happened. Okay, this is the Tophet. Let's see if I can find some images. Obviously, you won't find anything ghastly here because it's very ancient, about 2,500 years ago. So this is where allegedly the Carthaginian people used to practice the offering of children to the god Baal, whatever. Baal means the Lord in the Punic, in the Canaanite and Phoenician languages. So what was found by archaeologists in this region is tens of thousands of urns, sacrificial urns that contained the burned remains of infants and small animals. Okay, that's what archaeologists found in the Tophet in Carthage. And there are inscriptions talking about offerings to the god Baal Hadad or Baal Hamash or something, Baal something, one of the Baal gods, the Baal god of Carthage, Baal, Baal. So it looks like these were human sacrifices, child sacrifices. And typically the Greeks, not the Greeks, the Romans wrote about this, that the people of Carthage had this ghastly, evil tradition in which they offered children to this metallic bronze idol of some god, and that idol would be heated red hot and the children would be burned on that sort of thing. And this entire practice seems to have started in the near Jerusalem with the Canaanites. The Canaanites were probably a Judaic people, right? And the Hebrew Bible speaks about them and alleges that these people were very evil and they practiced child sacrifice. So yeah, so that's the kind of dark history we have, and looks like this sort of practice has continued behind the scenes in Western culture, and that's what apparently the rich and powerful people of the US seem to be still practicing. Apparently, there are whispers and allegations about this. So I don't know how true or false that is, but definitely we have this instance in history where you have the Canaanites who practice child sacrifice, burning of children near Jerusalem, and eventually this practice spread to North Africa, present-day Tunisia, that region in Carthage, and the archaeologists have found tens of thousands of urns that contain such apparent child sacrifices. So that's the deal. That's, I think, Western culture. Yeah. Now, human sacrifice in Indian culture. Human sacrifice in Indian culture. We obviously have, certain gods and goddesses that require human sacrifice. For example, Goddess Durga, she wears the necklace, the mala of human heads. You also have another goddess, Goddess Chamunda. If you see her murtis, you will see that she is this very scary looking goddess who has a necklace of human heads. And the goddess Chamunda was the Kul Devi of various Rajput families. She still is the Kul Devi of various Rajput families. And well, in the past, when Indians still ruled Indians, our kings still ruled us, that time it was required that sometimes you should offer human sacrifices to a goddess like Chamunda. Now, the question is, who would be chosen for sacrifice? Is the Hindu religion a bloodthirsty religion that requires human sacrifices? Then you would choose people for human sacrifice. No, it's not like that. Goddess Chamunda was the Kul Devi of Rajputs, because Rajputs were supposed to fight the evil people, right? They were supposed to fight off invaders and whoever else sought to, disrupt our way of life. And from about 700 AD, there was no dearth of such monsters who sought to destroy India. So, who did he choose for human sacrifice? The enemies of civilization, the barbarians who sought to invade India and plunder and destroy India. That's who you sacrificed. Either you defeated them in battle and brought the heads back and gave it to the goddess, or you took the prisoners and brought them to the goddess and then dealt with them in a manner that pleased the goddess. That's what you did. Children, absolutely never. We are not a monstrous. We are a civilization. We are the greatest and oldest civilization. There's no. You never hurt children. That's not our culture. That's Canaanite culture. That's Phoenician culture. That's American culture. That's Jeffrey Epstein and US elite culture to hurt children. You don't hurt children in Indian culture. Never. Never. So the coconuts were all adults. And later on, Indians became very soft and stopped sacrificing monsters, stopped killing monsters, and then you would offer coconuts to goddesses like Durga and Chamunda. That's where we went soft, I suppose. Okay, next question. Okay, we're still dealing with Epstein. Lage Raho Online says Epstein files have gathered more attention than any war news in the entire social media, in the entire world social media in the past few days. The most unsolved question is, what was Stephen Hawking doing there? How? Jokes apart, I've learned that never believe or trust biographies or autobiographies of anyone, or take them just as a piece of entertainment, not even infotainment. Yeah, so Stephen Hawking apparently is, I think there are pictures of him on Epstein Island apparently. And there's definitely evidence in the Epstein files that Stephen Hawking went to Epstein Island. Where is Epstein Island, by the way? Okay, I didn't mention that. So Epstein Island was this island. It is this island. It's called Little St. James or something. It's in the Caribbean region, the West Indies region. Okay, let's try and find it. Is it in the Bahamas? Little St. James Island. Let me see. Little St. James Island. Is it the USVI? Oh, Virgin Islands. It's the US Virgin Islands. Okay, I was not able to look at it. It's okay. So you zoom out, you have San Juan. Okay, it's east of Puerto Rico, US Virgin Islands in the West Indies. Okay. And if you zoom in, you have this little island here. And this is the little St. James Island. And if you look into that, you will find, whatever. The Epstein residence, mansion, and whatever else he had over there. So this is Epstein Island. And apparently Dr. Stephen Hawking visited this island. What was he doing there? Well, one wonders. Clearly he was up to no good. And near this island, okay, near this this little St. James Island, there is another interesting island. Let me see. Is this the one? What is this called? This is Stephen K, not this one. Give me a second. There's another rather interesting island over here. Where is it? Not the Great Saint James Island. What is this one? Dog Island, Dog Rocks. Not this one. Let me just search for it. Okay. Necker Island. Where is it? This is Necker Island. And where exactly are we? Okay, so Little St. James is here. Okay. And Necker Island is all the way here. Who owns Necker Island? It is Richard Branson who owns Necker Island. This is another privately owned island. And yeah. Anyhow, that's about the Epstein Island and all of that. Now, the question we're talking about is about Stephen Hawking, Professor Stephen Hawking, the man who proved that black holes radiate, one of the great scientists of the 20th century who died in the 21st century. And he was there. He visited Epstein Island at least once, probably, I don't know, at least once. We know that. What was he doing that? How was he doing that? Given the fact that he was completely paralyzed, I have no idea. But yeah, it's kind of, it changes your entire perspective and perception of a person. I mean, I come from a physics background. I have used Hawking's research in my own work, in my own research, and I kind of looked up to him, looked up to Stephen Hawking very much. And today, my entire image that I had in my mind of Stephen Hawking, it's kind of shattered now. Yeah. Many people would have idolized Elon Musk. Many people would have idolized Bill Gates and whoever. Well, those people, they'll be shattered today. They'll be heartbroken. I'm glad Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't figure in that. Neither does Sylvester Stallone, as far as I know. Even Charlie Sheen doesn't figure in the Epstein files. Anyhow, so I agree with Lageraho online that don't believe these biographies, autobiographies. They often are commissioned to portray various people in a very good light. And the truth may be very different from what we imagine. Right? So the point is, don't hero worship anybody. Understand that all human beings, there's the possibility that they have major flaws that are hiding behind the scenes. So don't hero worship anybody. Don't idolize anybody. If you admire somebody, you should ask yourself, what is it that I admire about this person? What qualities do I admire? Admire qualities, don't admire people. That is a more grounded way of admiring people, I suppose. Okay, now let's move on to something beyond Epstein. We've spent 40 minutes on Epstein, right? Okay, let's move on. Okay, now we have too many questions here, do we? Okay, you got a bunch of questions here about the US-India trade deal. Okay, let's begin. Amisha says, US-India trade deal seems like an order dictated to India by the USA. Why is the Indian government not forthcoming on the details agreed upon in this trade deal? Modi has not mentioned anything apart from tariff reduction. No use of the specific word trade deal, no mention of $500 billion investment or reduction of Russian oil. Is Trump again exaggerating all these things? Real Vladimir Putin says, many people are saying that India is compromised with the recent trade deal with the US, but India, being a weaker nation, has to agree on some compromises, given that we are retaining our sovereignty. Samarth says, is it a good move by Bharat to do a trade deal with the US at this point in time, where the US is openly behaving like an imperial power? Recently, the US abandoned their trade deal with South Korea and increased their tariffs on South Korea. So what do you think it's going to be? Is it beneficial for Bharat? Mrigan Kasikar Biswas says, what's your assessment of the India-US trade deal, given India's reported commitments to reduce Russian oil purchases, buy US and Venezuelan crude, and agree to purchase US agricultural produce, and yet secure lower tariffs than all regional peers? Do you see this as a calculated trade-off or early signs of economic vassalization under US pressure? Rushabh says, what's happening between India and Venezuela? PM Modi called Delcy Rodriguez. Now the recent India-US trade deal has happened. Even if we don't consider Donald Trump's claims of India stopping Russian oil, it is clear that India is looking towards other options, which even Russian foreign ministry spokeswoman acknowledged. And it is also true that Reliance had the waiver to buy oil till Donald J. Trump scrapped it. We have one of the largest refining capacities in the world. So is Venezuelan oil feasible for India economically? Amisha says $500 billion deal, no Russian oil, 18% tariffs. How will $500 billion deal be achieved? How is that a fair deal? Did India open its agricultural sector that has long been an issue for not getting the trade deal in the first place? All these questions, there is more. And now we have these questions. Abhishek Shukla Live says, your views on the India-US trade deal on the surface. I think India lost and US won. Agnivaran says, your views on the recent India-US trade deal. Is India now an American vassal? Soldier Boy says, well, about the recent trade deal with the USA, are we doomed? Have we given up? Are we vassalized? What is next? Ayush says, please share your detailed analysis of this recent India-US trade deal. Nayan Jyoti Bora says, is the newly announced trade deal with the US the last nail in the coffin for our sovereignty? So much concern everybody has, so much concern everyone has. Why is everybody so concerned? Is the question. Why is everyone so concerned? Because you have Indian politicians celebrating the trade deal. You have Indian politicians felicitating the Prime Minister for the trade deal. Everyone's announcing that the trade deal is some fantastic thing, especially in Parliament and whatnot. And the opposition politicians are saying it's a terrible deal and so on, right? And that's why everyone is so concerned. But what is the truth? What's happened? So let's look at what's happened, first of all, based on the pronouncements of various politicians. So first of all, we have this, okay? This is a tweet from the White House. It was on February 2. Today is February 6. So what does this say? It's a readout of what Donald J. Trump said. It was an honor to speak with Prime Minister Modi of India this morning. He is one of my greatest friends and a powerful and respected leader of his country. We spoke about many things, including trade and ending the war with Russia and Ukraine. He agreed to stop buying Russian oil and to buy much more from the United States and potentially Venezuela. This will help end the war in Ukraine, which is taking place right now, with thousands of people dying each and every week. Out of friendship and respect for Prime Minister Modi, and as per his request, effective immediately, we agreed to a trade deal between the United States and India, whereby the United States will charge a reduced reciprocal tariff, lowering it from 25% to 18%. They will likewise move forward to reduce their tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the United States to capital zero. The Prime Minister also committed to buy American at a much higher level, in addition to over $500 billion of US energy, technology, agricultural, coal, and many other products. Our amazing relationship with India will be even stronger going forward. Prime Minister Modi and I are two people that get things done, something that cannot be said for most. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, so that is what Trump has tweeted. Now, what has been the response of the Indian Prime Minister? What's been the response? Let's find out. Mr. Modi tweeted this as soon as he could. Wonderful to speak with my dear friend President Trump today. Delighted that made in India products will now have a reduced tariff of 18%. Big thanks to President Trump on behalf of the 1.4 billion people of India for this wonderful announcement. When two large economies and the world's largest democracies work together, it benefits our people and unlocks immense potential opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. President Trump's leadership is vital for global peace, stability, and prosperity. India fully supports his efforts for peace. I look forward to working closely with him to take our partnership to unprecedented heights. That's what the Prime Minister of India tweeted on X. Now, so what's the deal? Is this a disaster for India? My friends, here's the truth. There is no India-US trade deal. This is the truth. As of today, 6th of February 2026, there is no India-US trade deal. Nothing has been signed. Nothing has been signed. No trade deal has been signed. But Trump has gone ahead and tweeted this thing out. Once again, let's put this on the screen. He has gone ahead and tweeted this out. What Trump has done, you know what it's called? It's called gaslighting. India has not agreed to even half of these things. Right now, the negotiations are still going on. But Trump has tweeted as if this is done. as if the trade deal has been signed. That's how he has tweeted. And he has already decided what India is going to do. That India is going to stop buying Russian oil. And India is going to bring the tariffs on the US goods products down to zero. And the US will only apply then 18% tariffs. So India will have zero tariffs on US goods, but the US will have 18% tariffs on Indian goods. Super unequal, right? And he says that India will stop buying Russian oil. India will potentially buy much more oil from Venezuela. India will buy US agricultural products and so many more things. India will purchase $500 billion of God knows what other things. Trump has already decided all these things on behalf of India. India has not agreed to any of this. If it was agreed, it would have been signed. No such signing ceremony or any such thing has happened. The negotiations are still on. So here's the answer to your question. If what Trump has announced, if India accepts all of that, then the US wins, India loses. What Trump is saying is that the US will impose only 18% tariffs on Indian goods, and India will impose 0% tariffs on American goods. That is a master-slave relationship. That is an East India Company versus India relationship. If we agree to what Trump says, that is unacceptable to India. At least if I was in charge, I would reject this. Agricultural products. If we start importing American agricultural products, it will destroy our farm economy. It will destroy the Indian agricultural sector. How can the Indian government agree to that? That's again something we can't agree to. And if you want to have tariffs have to be reciprocal. So if you're imposing 18%, I will impose 18%. If you are powerful, okay, you impose 18, I'll impose 10. But it can't be 18 and 0. So the terms that he has announced are once again maximalist terms. Why has the India-US trade deal not happened after all these months of negotiations? Because the Americans are adopting a maximalist position. They are saying, we take everything, you get nothing. That's exactly what Trump has tweeted out. If India accepts what Trump has tweeted out, you can say that we are an American vassal. If India accepts what he has tweeted out, India loses, the US wins, India starts walking down the road of vassalhood, American vassalhood. If we accept what Trump has tweeted, then we are doomed. We are vassalized. Right? That will be the first, not the last nail, but the first nail in the coffin of our sovereignty. So the point is, no trade deal has happened. That's the first and foremost thing we have to keep in mind. Nothing has been signed. Trump is gaslighting the world. He's gaslighting India. He's applying pressure on India. He's bullying India by tweeting such things out. And when you see Modi's tweet, you will not see any of that. You will not see Modi saying in this tweet that we will stop buying Russian oil. You will not see Modi saying that we will buy $500 billion of whatnot. You will not see Modi saying that we will open up our agricultural sector to the Americans and so on. Modi has said none of those things. He has simply said, thank you, Mr. Trump, blah, 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 blah. Because when Trump says something, we have to say something nice to him. Okay? You have to keep him happy. You have to be very polite and very deferential to him. So that's what Mr. Modi has done. He has not agreed or accepted. He has not agreed to any of the terms that Trump has put out. Mr. Modi has not accepted any of those terms. So what is the status of the India-US trade deal? The status is there is no trade deal as of today. The Americans are still adopting a maximalist position. Will a trade deal happen soon? It may happen soon, depending on whether the US is willing to be a little reasonable or not. If the US continues with its maximalist position, I would say India should not sign anything. And that's the situation. So India has not lost. The US has not won. India has not become a US vassal. The nails in the coffin of our sovereignty have not been hammered in yet. Okay. Venezuela, yeah. Looks like India will buy some Venezuelan oil, but the Venezuelans don't have much of a capability to, let's say, replace the Russian oil that we are getting. So it won't make much of a difference. So end of the day, the bottom line is this. There is, as of today, 6th of February 2026, there is, as of today, no trade deal between India and the US. Nothing. Amisha says, will India lose Russia as an ally? If India doesn't buy Russian oil, it feels like we're going to lose Russia as an ally, at least to me. I would like to hear your thoughts on opinions on this. Rohan says, your views on India allowed to buy oil from Venezuela. India will get cheap oil from Venezuela and particularly high from the USA. So it will cost as much as Russian oil. What are your overall views on India-US trade? Okay, I discussed the trade deal, which is no trade deal. But here is an interesting tweet from Prime Minister Modi of India. So this was on January 30, 2026. Okay. Today is February 6, 2026. Mr. Modi says, spoke with acting president of Venezuela, Miss Delcy Rodriguez. We agreed to further deepen and expand our bilateral partnership in all areas with a shared vision of taking India-Venezuela relations to new heights in the years ahead. So that's what Mr. Modi has tweeted. He has not said anything about oil, but clearly Venezuela, its relevance to the world today is that of its oil, right? That's what the US has reduced Venezuela to a nation that is synonymous with oil. So maybe the Americans insisted that the Prime Minister of India, should speak with his Venezuelan acting counterpart, the acting leader of Venezuela, and maybe discuss oil purchases, potential oil purchases, whatever. And then Trump has gone ahead and said that, India may be purchasing large quantities of Venezuelan oil. Now, the thing is, Venezuela does have possibly about 20% of the world's proven oil reserves, but its capacity of exporting oil, extracting and exporting oil is just a fraction of the oil reserves. India imports a very large quantity of. Let's find out. Okay, let's find out in real time how many barrels of. Okay, let's ask Google's AI about this. How many barrels of Russian oil did India import in Jan 2026? Let's see. In January, 1.16 million to let's say 1.2 million barrels per day. That's what India imported. Okay, so keep this in mind. Make a note of this. Every day, India was importing 1.2 million barrels of Russian crude oil. Okay, how many barrels of crude can Venezuela produce per day? How many barrels of oil? 800,000, not even 1 million barrels of oil per day. So Venezuela's oil production is currently 800,000 barrels per day. India is importing 1.2 million barrels per day from Russia. Can Venezuela replace that, even if it sends all of its oil to India? No. Not possible. Venezuela can't replace that. Secondly, the Venezuelan oil is a different grade compared to the Russian oil. Venezuela's oil is extra heavy, sour crude oil. It's very thick and it's got very high sulfur content. Only 4 refineries in the world can process that oil. One of those refineries is in India. But it's not suitable for everything. It's suitable for maybe producing asphalt, maybe producing diesel. But what about petrol and other things? Very hard to extract that from Venezuelan crude. But the Russian crude, which is also heavy, but not that sour and not that heavy, we can extract other, petrol, etc. from that. So we can't replace the Russian crude with Venezuelan crude. It doesn't work. Makes no sense, right? Now the thing is, the Americans have now allowed magnanimously India to purchase Venezuelan oil. Until 2010, about 10% of India's oil imports came from Venezuela. Then the Americans came and said India can no longer purchase Venezuelan crude oil. We forbid it. So India obediently stopped buying Venezuelan crude oil. Now the Americans have magnanimously allowed us, given us permission. Okay, now we can buy again. But it's not like we're going to take their orders all the time. And secondly, Venezuelan crude oil is not suitable for all our requirements, and it's not sufficient for our requirements. And lastly, our relationship with Russia is very important. Russia is a nation that we can trust way more than the US. It is the nation we can trust the most among all the nations we deal with. We have a very long standing, tried and tested relationship with Russia. We've had some ups and downs, we've had some irritants. Any relationship with any two nations is going to have some irritants. But overall, Russia has never done anything that has harmed India's national interests to any significant level. And neither has India done the same to Russia. So we can trust Russia. Russia doesn't Russia doesn't fund and finance Pakistani terrorism against us. The Americans did that with Pakistan from the 1980s onwards. Russia has never done that. You can't trust the Americans to the extent we can trust the Russians. And we don't want Russia to become completely dependent on China. If we stop purchasing Russian crude oil, it will be a big setback to Russia. We need Russia to be strong. We need Russia to be relevant. We can't allow Russia to become a Chinese vassal. It is India that prevented Russia from sliding into Chinese vassalhood from 2022 onwards, because we started purchasing large quantities of Russian oil, and that acted as a pressure release valve for Russia. Otherwise, it would have become completely isolated in the world and completely dependent on China. We prevented that from happening. And we have to keep playing that role. So I don't think India will ever stop purchasing Russian oil. It's not about prices. It's not only about prices. Okay, prices matter. And that's why Russia will ensure that it doesn't sell India overpriced oil. The oil the Russians sell to us it's typically slightly lower than the market rate, going market rate. So they are also honoring the relationship, right? They're also respecting the fact that we are helping them out. So I think that relationship will continue. I don't think we will stop purchasing Russian oil. If we do stop purchasing Russian oil, it is a very big red flag of Indian vassalhood to the US, in my opinion. Okay? It's going to be a very big red flag for me that India is now on the road towards becoming a US vassal if we stop purchasing Russian oil. What do we get in exchange? What, Venezuelan oil? A pat on the back from Uncle Trump? We don't need that. Okay, so yeah. Samarth Pramanik says, what is the future of Iran? US is constantly increasing its firepower in West Asia, just like what they did in Venezuela before abducting Nicolas Maduro. What action can the US take against Iran, according to me? Rushabh Tare says, US and Iran have nuclear talks in Oman. Iran seems to tone down their narrative. The US too looks aligned for a deal, but they still maintain their naval armada in the Middle East. They've ordered the US citizens to leave Iran. What's next? Will there be no war, or is there still a chance of war? How do you see it from the Israeli and Indian perspective? Okay. The future of Iran. So right now, the Americans have built up a massive naval presence, a reasonably large naval presence in the Western Indian Ocean, the so-called Arabian Sea. Let's find out where. Okay. For illustrative purposes, I'm going to give you the general area where this is happening. It's not necessarily the exact location of the American warships, but close enough. So we're talking about the so-called Arabian Sea. That's the Western Indian Ocean, the Gulf of Oman region, near that, not too close to the Iran coast, but definitely the Western Indian Ocean region. And you will have a presence of US ships in this region, maybe even the Red Sea, but mainly the Western Indian Ocean. And of course, the US has this place called Diego Garcia, from where they can project massive power in the subcontinent and extended subcontinent region, in which we also have Iran. So the Americans can have strategic bombers, long distance bombers take off from here. They can also have aircraft carriers that are stationed here, and that's Diego Garcia. So the Americans have built up a massive, reasonably strong and increasing naval presence in this region. So what's going to happen? Are the Americans going to invade Iran? Or are they simply using this naval presence as a tool to arm twist Iran to get the Iranians to do what the Americans want? So let's ask ourselves, what do the Americans want with Iran? The Americans want essentially two things. They want Iran to dismantle its nuclear program. That's number one. Number two, they want control over Iran's oil. The Americans don't care about whether it's an Islamic regime or a Zoroastrian regime or an atheistic regime or a Christian regime in Iran. They only care about the oil. They'll be very happy to work with the current government of Iran as long as this government accepts American conditions of allowing the Americans to decide the fate of Iranian oil. Sell all the oil to America or to nations America allows you to sell to. Don't sell to China. The objective is to squeeze China. And of course, the Iranians must dismantle roll back their nuclear program verifiably. These are the two things the Americans want. They are not really interested in a regime change per se. That's also what Israel wants. As long as the Iranians demonstrably dismantle the nuclear program, and that's number one that Israel wants. But Israel will not be satisfied with that. Israel also knows that the Iranians have God knows how many missiles of various kinds, which can do tremendous damage to Israel, and that can circumvent the Iron Dome that the Israelis have. So Israel actually wants a regime change in Tehran. Israel will not be satisfied with mere control over Iranian oil and a rollback of the nuclear program. Israel wants a regime change. The US is okay with just the rollback of the nuclear program and control of Iranian oil. From the Indian perspective, what do we seek? We would like the Iranian government to stay in place. Okay, geopolitically, we need this government to stay in place, the current government. If there is a regime change in Iran, and the so-called democratic government comes to power, or if the Americans parachute Reza Pahlavi to power, then Iran becomes a super Pakistan for us, a pro-American nation, a US vassal, much larger and much more powerful than Pakistan. And it will be pro-Pakistan in that case. If Iran falls to the Americans in regime change, then in a year or two, you may have American troops in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So a regime change in Iran is not in India's favor. India doesn't want that. From our perspective, we don't need that. We don't want that. From Israel's perspective, regime change is what they want. From America's perspective, they want a rollback of the nuclear program and control of the Iranian oil. What will Iran do about this? Iran is under tremendous pressure. Iran has a lot of firepower, missile firepower, but the Americans can still defeat Iran. Okay, at very high cost, but it's possible. So if the Americans launch a military invasion, it will be very costly, very damaging. It will take a lot of time, energy, effort, dollars, but the Americans will eventually win. But do the Americans want to take all the trouble of a military invasion? The other option the Americans have is proxy war against Iran. Like in the 1980s, 1990s, 2010s, the Americans funded and financed Pakistani terrorism against India, bleeding India by 1,000 cuts. The Americans could do the same to Iran. They could use Pakistani terrorists on Iran's eastern border to infiltrate Iran and bleed Iran. Pakistan is the world's biggest expert in terrorism. It's the epicenter of terrorism, right? And on the western front of Iran's western border, the Americans could use ISIS and Al-Qaeda to bleed Iran, to infiltrate and bleed Iran. So one of the American vassal states in West Asia is Syria. Syria was ruled by Bashar al-Assad. Now he's in Moscow, apparently. And Syria is now ruled by a terrorist, ISIS terrorist called Julani. His nom de guerre was Julani. Now he's called Al-Shara or whatever. So he's an ISIS terrorist. He is an American ally. He controls a bunch of ISIS fighters. Turkey is hand in glove with ISIS. So Turkey and the Julani fellow, they could infiltrate Iran in various ways with ISIS fighters and do terrible things. So by doing that, you can destabilize Iran over time and perhaps do a regime change. These are various options the Americans have, maybe a hybrid approach or whatever. So what's the future of Iran? The future of Iran is shaky. Iran has tremendous enemies in the region. Obviously, there are countries in the region who don't want a military invasion of Iran because that will be very destabilizing for the region. So maybe the Americans will go for the other option of using terrorism and Pakistani and ISIS terrorism and Al-Qaeda terrorism against Iran. That's a possibility. So we're going to have nuclear talks in Iran. What's going to happen? They'll fail. Iran will refuse to dismantle its nuclear program, most likely. If they agree, then the next demand will be much higher. You guys resign and leave. So I don't see that happening. So yeah, that's where Iran is today, in a very precarious situation, but still powerful, still strong, powerful enough to significantly withstand a US attempt to invade it. Rushabh Tare says, what is happening in the ties between India and the Middle East? On the one side, our deputy NSA, National Security Advisor, goes to Iran and meets with Iranian officials. Chief of Defense Services Staff Anil Chauhan went to Armenia, met PM Pashinyan of Armenia, and paid tribute to 1.5 million Armenians who were killed by the Turks in the Armenian genocide. India's NSA Ajit Doval is in Saudi Arabia. India and the Gulf Cooperation Council sign FTA reference terms in presence of Piyush Goyal. India, UAE, and India-Israel ties remain at all-time highs. What exactly is India's strategy in the Middle East? Okay. Let's understand what's happening in the Middle East. There is an unseen rivalry that has now come to light in the Middle East. And this rivalry is Saudi Arabia versus UAE. See, UAE, from the 1970s, 1980 onwards, has been focused on development. It has been laser focused on becoming an attractive destination for expatriates to live in, an attractive destination for foreign direct investment, an attractive destination for tourism, and so many other things. And the UAE has worked really, really hard to make this happen. And today, the UAE is a big success story. About 40% of UAE's population is of Indian origin. They are not citizens, they are long-term residents or short-term residents, but 40% of the population is Indian origin. A lot of people from the West live in the UAE. The UAE is super successful, super wealthy. Abu Dhabi has a lot of oil. Dubai has a lot of expats. And you have Hindu temples there and whatnot, right? So it's a success story. It's a great success story. The UAE, they've worked very hard for this and they deserve the success that they've achieved. Now, Saudi Arabia tried to do that. There was this upheaval in Saudi Arabia in the 2010s, late 2010s, and Prince Mohammed bin Salman became the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, and he tried to copy the UAE trajectory. So he liberalized Saudi society. He gave Saudi ladies, Saudi women, the right to come out in public without coverings, I suppose, and drive automobiles and all that. And he embarked on these massive infrastructure projects like the Lion City and Neom and whatnot. But it's not really worked out, because in the UAE, the quality of the population is very high. They're very well educated, and they are more liberal, more Western, more secular, whatever you want to call them, right? Highly educated. The Saudi population is very different. So it's not really, that's one of various factors, okay? So Saudi Arabia tried to become a super UAE kind of country. It has not worked out. And now Saudi Arabia has decided that we're going to revert to what we really are. So Saudi Arabia last year signed this deal with Pakistan, mutual defense deal. If somebody attacks Saudi Arabia, Pakistan will come to Saudi Arabia's rescue. If somebody attacks Pakistan, Saudi Arabia will come to Pakistan's rescue. That sort of thing, which is very anti-India, obviously. And Saudi Arabia and Pakistan have another partner, which is Turkey. Okay? Which is like a Western Asian version of Pakistan. A slightly lighter skinned version of Pakistan. But once again, Turkey is a nation that doesn't have a history. It has a criminal record. Armenian genocide. Right? The Ottoman Empire and the horrific brutalities it did. So their history is more of a criminal record than a history. And their approach is, they are hand in glove with ISIS, the Turks. So once again, just like Pakistan, very terroristic tendencies. So Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey are now this alliance, you could say, in West Asia. Pakistan, obviously, in the subcontinent, and Saudi Arabia and Turkey are in West Asia. Now, there's a Saudi Arabia versus UAE rivalry also, and I'll not go into the details of that, otherwise it becomes too long. But these two nations are rivals, Saudi Arabia and UAE. They are rivals in Yemen, they are rivals in the Horn of Africa, in Sudan, in Somalia, everywhere. In Somaliland also, and so on and so forth. So there is this rivalry, Saudi Arabia versus UAE. Now, the UAE and India have an excellent relationship. Excellent relationship. Okay? One of the very visible reasons is that 40% roughly of UAE's population of Indian origin. There are Hindu temples in the UAE. India and the UAE have a very robust, we have an FTA, we have defense relations. It's a great relationship. Okay? And there's another partner in this India-UAE relationship, which is Israel. UAE and Israel are also on very good terms, and India and Israel are obviously on excellent terms. So it's India, UAE, Israel versus Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey. That is the situation in West Asia. When it comes to Armenia, India, and Israel are kind of on opposite sides, because India supports Armenia, but Israel supports Azerbaijan. But Israel doesn't support Azerbaijan out of ideological reasons. It supports Azerbaijan because it seeks Azerbaijani oil. Israel needs that, right? It gets oil and hydrocarbons from Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan and Turkey seek to erase Armenia from the map of the world. And India and Iran are working together to prevent this from happening and to support Armenia. So that is the situation. We also have a very good relationship with Greece, which is kind of west of Turkey. Turkey squats on Greek territory, obviously, Anatolia, which is a whole different story. And Turkey is an aggressor towards Greece and towards Cyprus. And India has good relations with Greece and Cyprus. So there's a whole lot happening in this region. And that essentially is India's situation, India's strategy in the Middle East. Gaurav Pagare says, if Japan is said to be acquiring nukes in a few years, wouldn't that then pave the path for Japan to gain a bit of sovereignty? So, when did Henry Kissinger tragically pass away? Let me just see. I think it was like 23, was it? Henry Kissinger. When did he die? He tragically passed away in November 2023 at the age of 99. Very tragic. Now, Mr. Kissinger, a few months before he passed away, tragically, he said that Japan will most likely become a nuclear power in the next 5 years. So we have a deadline of 2028 to see whether Mr. Kissinger was correct or not in his assessment. He typically used to be correct in whatever he said. He had a very good understanding of the world. So let's say Japan becomes a nuclear power by 2028. Does that mean that they will acquire some sovereignty because of the nukes? Ask yourselves this question. The UK has nukes. Is the UK a sovereign nation? The UK is not a sovereign nation. The UK is a hard and fast vassal of the US. Why is the UK a vassal of the US? Because the UK's nuclear warheads are mated to American missiles. So let's say this is the British warhead. The British made the warhead, but the missile is American. So who has the big red button? Is it whoever's the Prime Minister of the UK? No. The big red button isn't in London, it's in Washington. So despite the UK having nukes on paper, the actual control of the nukes is in Washington. Similarly, if the Americans allow Japan to acquire nukes, do you think the Americans will allow the Japanese to actually manufacture the nukes? No. They will transfer some American nukes to Japanese soil, and those nukes will be 100% entirely controlled by American troops. There are more than 130 permanent US military bases on Japanese territory. Those nukes will be stationed in some of these bases. They'll be controlled entirely by the US, but on paper they will be Japanese nukes. Does this look like a sovereignty arrangement for you? Pakistan has nukes, right? Apparently. Do you think those are Pakistani nukes? I am certain, obviously without evidence, but I'm certain these are American nukes on Pakistani soil. And the objective is to threaten India. So it's not like the Pakistanis have any control over those nukes. The Americans control those nukes. See what happened in Operation Sindoor. What happened to Pakistan's nuclear blackmail and bluff? What happened? We hammered them. What did the Pakistanis do? They ran to the Americans, pleading for mercy. So the point is, if Japan acquires nukes, those nukes will be on Japanese territory on paper. No, actually, they'll be on Japanese territory, but they will belong to Japan only on paper, only technically. They will actually be owned and operated and 100% controlled by American generals and American troops. So no sovereignty, unfortunately. Okay, 3 questions here. Arya Vashishta says, when will we see the first Bangladeshi Deputy Prime Minister of India? As Manipur now has one cookie Deputy Chief Minister. We can't protect our land and our citizens. Real Vladimir Putin says the BJP government of Manipur has installed Nemcha Kipgin, who is a cookie, as Deputy Chief Minister of Manipur. Are we infiltrated? Vashishta says, I don't know whether you will take this question or not, but seeing a cookie become Deputy Chief Minister of Manipur boils my blood. what the hell? We can't protect our land, our citizens. To make things even worse, we are collaborating with the infiltrators. To hell with democracy, human rights. To hell with this constitution, the system. A lot of frustration. So it looks like Manipur now has the president's rule has ended apparently in Manipur, and there's a new chief minister of Manipur uh, and two deputy chief ministers. So the chief minister of Manipur, let's find out who these people are. Okay, let's find out who the chief minister, deputy chief ministers, etc. are. Let's ask Google. Who is the new chief minister? Who is the new CM of Manipur? Manipur. It is Yumnam Khemchand Singh of the BJP. So Yumnam Khemchand Singh is a Meitei. He belongs to the indigenous community of Manipur, which is the Meitei community. Okay, they are the indigenous people of Manipur. The other indigenous people of Manipur are the Nagas. So who are the new deputy CMs of Manipur? So Nemcha Kipgin and Lucy Dikho. Lucy Dikho is a Naga person, and Nemcha Kipgin is a Kuki person. So let's find out about Nemcha Kipgin. Who is Nemcha Kipgin? Is an Indian politician, member of the BJP, serving as Deputy Chief Minister of Manipur since 2026. A member of the Manipur Legislative Assembly it's a lady, right? Who is Nemcha Kipgin? Who is her husband? And what does he do? So let's find out. Key details, etc., etc. Who's the husband? Nemcha Kipgen is married to St. Thangboy Kipgen. Of occupation, St. Thangboy Kipgen is the chairman of the Kuki National Front. The Kuki National Front is a militant group that has been under a SOO agreement with the government of India since 2008. So the husband of this person, Nemcha Kipgen, is the chairman of the Kuki National Front. Is Kuki land a nation? Is Kuki land a nation? I wonder. If somebody calls Kuki land a nation or a Kuki nation, they're talking about Kuki land for Christ, right? So the husband of this lady is the chairman of the Kuki National Front. The KNF is a militant group. A militant group that has been in this suspension of operations SOO agreement with the government of India since 2008. Now, what can I say about this? The Deputy Chief Minister of Manipur is a Kuki person whose husband is the chairman of the Kuki National Front, a militant group. I did not make the claim. Google is showing us this. You can do your own due diligence. You can do your own fact checking. This is the new government of Manipur. What can I say? Congratulations to the people of Manipur and the people of India. Great job, government of India. Great job. I have nothing more to say about that. Okay. Billy Bob says, as a British person who has some Indian heritage, I would like to know, if you had the power to alter the country, what changes would you make to India to turn it into a global superpower? From your previous videos, India had a massive global economy until economic predation by the British Empire. How would you reverse this, and is it even possible? It is possible. It will take some time. What steps would I take to change the trajectory of the country? I would, first of all, I would say, I would make it mandatory for Indians to not utter the word superpower or Vishwaguru for at least 20 years. First thing, no Indian should be allowed to utter the words superpower or Vishwaguru for 20 years. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I would eject all illegal infiltrators who are squatting on Indian territory, whether they are Rohingyas, whether they are Bangladeshis, whether they are Kukis, whether they are Pakistanis, whether they are whatever. If they have come into India illegally, they have to be expelled. That has to happen at the earliest. That's another thing I would do. The third thing I would do is reform the education system. 20 years is a reasonable amount of time to reform the education system. And what reforms? I have made entire videos about that, what reforms are needed in India. So I would reform the education system. Um, Next, I would try my best to end corruption, the alleged corruption that allegedly runs the entire system of the country. That's another thing I would do. And what else would I do? So education system, I would place special emphasis on Indian culture, a revival of Indian culture, revival of Indian archaeological heritage, setting up institutions that promote Indian culture and so on, which the government of India historically has never bothered to do since 1947 until today. I would promote Indian tourism. India has the potential to be the superpower of tourism in the world, but doesn't give a damn, right? So that's another thing I would do. And obviously, I would bolster the Indian military. I would really, really focus on indigenous development of various weapon systems, of aircraft, of submarines, of ships, of all kinds of things, rifles, carbines, missiles, all of that. Indigenize everything as far as possible. Whatever technology we're lacking, buy, beg, borrow, steal, whatever you need to do that. Focus on science and technology, on AI, on quantum computing, on space research and exploration, space, settling in space, all of that. These are some of the things I would do. Is it possible? It is possible. It will take time, but it won't happen under this system. The current system, the Westminster parliamentary democracy system that we have, and this federal system where states have so many power, it just doesn't work for India. As long as India has this system, forget about superpower. India won't even become a middle power, right? It's just designed to fail. It sets India up for failure. It guarantees mediocrity. So the system has to be totally reversed, totally reformed, or rather replaced. So what would I do? I would do away with the constitution. I would bring in at least a presidential form of government. Well, ideally, a single president for 20 years. These are some of the things that are needed. Otherwise, India is destined for mediocrity, the way we are going right now. Whoever the leaders are, India is destined to remain mediocre, the way things are going. So it needs major changes for sure. Okay, let's talk about history now for a bit. Amisha says, where were the Vedic texts composed geographically? So we have 4 Vedas, and we will not discuss all 4 Vedas, right? But let us talk about the Rig Veda, the oldest of the Vedas, the oldest literature known to humankind. A lot of people dispute that, but it is the oldest literature known to humankind, the Rig Veda. So what is the geography of the Rig Veda? Right? The Rig Veda has a lot of geographical information. It has a lot of climate information. It has information about flora and fauna, about trees, about grasses, about animals and birds, about rivers, about mountains, right? So all of this textual literary information helps you to place the geography of the Rig Veda. Where was the Rig Veda composed, right? So from what we see, so for example, let's talk about rivers. Okay, the Rig Veda mentions a lot of rivers. What are the rivers? First of all, so what is the river horizon of the Rig Veda? It runs from Gandhar. Gandhar means Afghanistan, the Kubha region, Kabul region. Okay, north and west it's the Gandhar region, and south and east it's the Kurukshetra region, which is Haryana, and the Ganga basin, the Ganga valley region in the east. Okay, and the densest cluster essentially is the Sapta Sindhu region, the Sindhu, the Saraswati, and essentially the 7 tributary rivers in the region, the Sapta Sindhu region. Which are these rivers? We obviously have the Saraswati, the greatest of the rivers. We have the Sindhu, we have the Vitashta, which is the Jhelum river. We have the Akshini, which is the Chenab. We have the Parushni, the Ravi, and the Vipasha river, the Satluj, right? And we also have various other rivers like the Drishadwati. It also mentions the Yamuna. It also obviously mentions the Ganga. So all of these rivers tell us the geographical region that the people who wrote the Rig Veda were aware of, the region they lived in. So from Gandhara all the way in the north and west to the Ganga valley region in the east, the south and the east. and the major focus is the Sapta Sindhu region, and the major rivers are the Saraswati and the Sindhu in that region. Okay, so the Sapta Sindhu region is essentially between the two great rivers, the Saraswati and the Sindhu. The Sindhu is in the western part of the Sapta Sindhu, and the Saraswati is in the eastern part of the Sapta Sindhu region, and that obviously is today's Ghaggar Hakra river. Okay, so so it's all the way from Afghanistan to the Punjab, Haryana, and western UP region, and the focus is on Punjab. Clearly, there's no Central Asia or Far Eastern India or Southern India in this. Okay, there's no Central Asia, all of that. It is northern and western India. What kind of climate do we have? What kind of landscape do we have? So the Rig Vedic hymns, they repeatedly describe strong monsoon, okay, torrential rains in the monsoon. And these torrential rains give rise to this great river, the mother of floods, the Saraswati. And the other rivers are also swollen rivers, the swell in the monsoon, and storms, and the breaking of drought by these monsoon storms. Okay, so this is clearly the signature of the Indian rainy season climate, the monsoon climate. This has nothing to do with Central Asia and in the steppe region of Central Asia. Okay, and there are mentions of arid conditions and semi-arid conditions, and the need for wells and watering points. So that is essentially talking about Rajasthan, the Rajasthan area, the fringes of Rajasthan, on the margins of the monsoon region of India. And obviously, the Rig Veda mentions the Himalayas, the great Himalayas to the north, right? So if you look at all of this evidence, it's consistent with the population living south of the Himalayan range and within the confines of the rivers that we just discussed, the Sapta Sindhu region mainly, and west of the Ganga. I mean, it includes the Ganga plains, west of that, and probably north of the present-day Rajasthan region, but including the northern fringes of the Rajasthan region, right? And what about the plants and animal references? So plants in the Rig Veda include the bamboo, the lotus, various kinds of Indian grasses, and the animals, they include tigers and lions. Imagine tigers and lions, typical Indian subcontinent. The Indian subcontinent is the only place where we have tigers as well as lions, right? So we have tigers, we have lions, we have the kapihi, that is monkey. We have the hastin or ubha, which is the elephant. We also have leopards and so on. So these are the animals that we find obviously in the Indian subcontinent, not in Central Asia, not in Europe, not anywhere else. The trees that are discussed are also subcontinental trees. We don't have birch bark, birch forests or whatever, the kind of forests you have in Central Asia, in the steppe region. We don't have references to reindeers and elks that is found up north. We don't have references to aurora borealis or those climate in the Arctic regions. None of that. So clearly Indian conditions, okay, within the Sapta Sindhu region mainly. You put all of this together, it's clear it's from Afghanistan to the north, all the way to Rajasthan in the south, the Ganga plains in the east, all the way to essentially Balochistan in the west. So that essentially is the region of the Rig Veda. Nirvana Shank says, I've always wondered what were the origins of Japan and its early society, and how did the Yamato rulers, Shinto traditions, and early social structures come together to shape the first political, religious, and cultural foundations that influenced Japanese civilization for centuries. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Japan, fascinating civilization, fascinating culture, very ancient roots of this culture, very beautiful culture even today, deep linkages with Indian civilization and culture, polytheistic culture, all of that, right? Very similar to India in so many ways, and very 2000-year relationship with India also. So how did Japan start off? Starts off like 2000, 3000, maybe several thousand BC. So Japan starts off as many small groups, many small pockets of people on the Japanese islands. First of all, let's look at the islands, shall we? So what do the Japanese islands look like? So Japan is this archipelago east of Eastern Asia, right? This is Japan. It's an archipelago. You have the northern island, the great island Hokkaido. Then you have the Kuril Islands, which are now part of Russia. Then we have the major island of Japan, on which we have Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, and so on. Then we have Tokushima, this island here. Okay. Then we also have this island here, and a lot of other islands like Yakushima, like Toshima, and we have Okinawa. Where is Okinawa? This obviously is Okinawa, and it goes all the way to the outskirts of Taiwan, Taketomi Island, and Yonaguni. So these are the Japanese islands, and a bunch of more islands they have all around the place, right? So that is Japan. It's an archipelago. Where is Tsushima? Tsushima. This is Tsushima. And you had battles here between samurais and Mongols. Mongols belonging to the empire of Shri Kublai Khan. And the Mongols lost. Kublai Khan, not Genghis. Genghis never lost the thing. Kublai did, his grandson. Now, coming back to Japan. So that is Japan. So Japan starts off as many small groups of people on these islands, okay? And over time, one powerful group emerged, the Yamato. And they used religion, Shinto, and the social hierarchy of Japan to pull all these groups together into what eventually became Japanese civilization. So first of all, you had a bunch of people called the Jomon people. Jomon, they were hunter-gatherers. They did hunting and fishing and gathering of seaweed and gathering of plants and all that. And they made these distinctive clay pots. Let's take a look at the Jomon clay pots. Okay, let's quickly take a look at that. Jomon clay pots. Very famous. Jomon clay pots. Very famous. Jomon pottery. So very distinctive, very famous pottery, Jomon pottery. Okay, so the Jomon people made these very famous clay pots and the pottery and all of that. Then you had people who came in from the Asian mainland, East Asia, Northeast Asia, a bunch of people called the Yayoi people. So they brought new practices into Japan, into the Japanese islands, metal tools, weapons, and rice farming, agriculture, various kinds of agriculture. All of that was brought into Japan by the Yayoi people. So then you have the introduction of rice farming in Japan. So because of this, you had people who could settle down, and this gave rise to larger villages, and people started focusing on irrigation. And as a consequence, some communities became more powerful and larger and more powerful than others. So you had all these different groups of people. Typically, these were clans. Clans are extended families. They're not tribes, they're extended families. So you had all these different clans in Japan with their own land, with their own gods, with their own set of gods, with their own warriors. So each clan, each group of people would have a separate set of gods that they would worship. So it was a very polytheistic system in Japan. Then around about 3rd to 5th century AD, one clan emerged more powerful than the others. This clan was called the Yamato clans. So the Yamato leaders, they initially were just, local chieftains. Then they eventually started calling themselves kings. And eventually they became emperors. So they started ruling over other clans slowly, and eventually the whole of Japan. So that is how the Yamato took over in Japan. So society in Japan was built around these clans. Each clan had a small chieftain. Each clan was small, and each had a chieftain who was the main priest, who was also the political leader. And society was hierarchical, upper classes, lower classes, all of that, farmers. Society needs to have structure. Every society has structure. So you had a hierarchy in society, like every other society in the world. And most people, they farmed rice and did fishing, and some would be warriors and that sort of thing. So early Japanese religion was called Shinto. It was all about spirits. Kami. You've heard the word kamikaze? The storm of the gods or something, kamikaze, right? The divine wind. The kamikaze is this divine wind that saved Japan from the Mongol invasions, not just one but two Mongol invasions, the kamikaze. So kami means the Japanese gods, Japanese spirits, nature spirits, mountain spirits, river spirits, ancestral spirits, storm spirits, and so on. These are the kami. So the Shinto religion, the original religion of the Japanese, was all about various kami and the worship of kami. Each clan had its own set of kami that they worshipped, and each clan would have its own festivals, its own rituals to keep the kami happy and to ensure that the clan was protected from bad fortune and whatever, right? And there was no holy book, there was no prophet, there were no rules. It was all about various local customs and rituals and offerings, respect for your ancestors, respect for nature. Sounds exactly like Hinduism, not like Buddhism, right? So that was the culture of Japan. And the Yamato rulers, eventually they became powerful, and they claimed that their ancestors were linked to very important, very powerful kami, the sun goddess. I forget the name of the sun goddess, and so on. And so by making these claims, they sought to make their leadership seem more natural and sacred, just based on the laws of nature and all that. And this was the beginning of the idea that the emperor's family has divine connection, divine protection, right? And the emperor is the son of God, that sort of thing. And this became a core part of Japanese political life and religious life for centuries. And this is essentially the foundation of Japanese society, Japanese culture, Japanese civilization. Eventually, you had the idea in Japan of one central ruler, the emperor, who ruled over all the clans. And eventually, sometimes you had a situation where the emperor was ruler only in name, and the real power was in the hands of maybe shoguns or samurai, that sort of thing. But the emperor was the embodiment of the rule of Japan and that sort of thing. So that is essentially the forces that have shaped Japan. Shinto traditions. It's Japanese society historically was about villages that engaged in rice farming and fishing and so on, clan-based society. And then you had Yamato rulers who built a centralized state, and it was all about Shinto beliefs, about kami and sacred ancestors. And eventually you had Hindu and Buddhist traditions coming in from the West, from China, from India through China, and that was then syncretized into Japanese society and culture. And eventually the kami and the Buddha, they kind of came together, and you had a whole bunch of Indian deities that the Japanese started worshipping as kami. One of the great kamis was Benzaiten, right? Saraswati. Another kami is Kangiten, that is Vinayak, that is obviously Lord Ganesh. And every other Hindu god or goddess was incorporated into the pantheon of the kami. So a lot of Hindu practices became Shintoized. It was just natural. It was a natural fit. Buddhism was more artificially fitted into Japan, but Hinduism was a natural fit for Japan. So that kind of is the story of Japan. Died with Prigozhin says, who are the Cossacks? How are they different from the average Russian and Ukrainian? I have read about their involvement in military battles and conquests like Siberia and Caucasus. So when I was a kid, I had seen these Cossack dancers and Cossack fighters. I thought they were from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan was a part of the USSR, right? But not quite so. So, Cossacks. So the Cossacks look like this, and the Cossacks are Cossack squat is very interesting. It's a great squat if you are into exercise. The Cossack squat, and the Cossack dance. It's a very acrobatic dance, right? This it's typically men who do that, but apparently even ladies. But it's typically men, soldiers, who do the Cossack dance, the dance of the Cossacks. It's a very spectacularly acrobatic performance. So as a kid, as a child, I imagined that the Cossacks were the Kazakhs from Kazakhstan, but it's not quite the case. So who were the Cossacks? The Cossacks of Russia. What's the origin of this word? It probably is from a Turkic word that means a free person or an adventurer. Okay, so the Cossacks were people who lived in the frontiers of Russia, the borderlands of Russia. They lived very differently from the standard, regular Russian and Ukrainian people. Okay, they were mostly Slavic people, not Turkic people, mostly Slavic people. But they eventually became a separate warrior community. They had their own rules, they had their own traditions. So about 500 or 600 years before today, a bunch of people formed groups on the borderlands, on the steppe, in the steppe region of Russia, and they settled down in the region, and they kind of became the protection of Russia from various, outside groups like the Tatars and so on. So the Cossacks would settle in the borderlands, and they would protect the interior parts of Russia from the outsiders, from the Tatars and other various wild tribes. They would protect the farmlands and the farmers from these nomadic tribes. Okay, and these Cossacks were typically runaway peasants who did not want to be under the various feudal landlords who ruled Russia. So they ran away and they moved to the frontier and lived by hunting, fighting, sometimes raiding other tribes, and so on. So it's like people living your regular village life to live on the edge of civilization. It's kind of like the Wild West, the great push westwards that you had in the in North America. That's what the English did, right? So they lived on the edge of civilization. They were armed, they were organized, and kind of like the frontier cowboys of the Wild West. So the Cossacks were horsemen, they were fighters, they were warriors. Their job was essentially guarding the borders. They lived in towns and villages, and they used to have a leader called a hetman or something, and they kind of had a warrior democracy kind of system. That's what it was, right? That's what the Cossacks were, and they had to be under the authority of the Russian government, of the Russian Tsar, and they defended the empire. And a Cossack typically was expected to serve about 20 years in the service of the Tsar, and then they became free to do whatever they want. Typically, that was the kind of obligation they had to the empire. So they were armed frontier warriors. They had freedom, but they also had a tough military duty, and they had more freedom than the regular farmers and all who were under the feudal structure in Russia. So that is the Cossacks of Russia. Krishna of the Surinamese Netherlands says, what were the cultures and dietary habits of the Scythians like? Did they eat meat or fish, or were they vegetarian? They also had Bharatvarsha DNA. What were their cultural similarities with Bharatvarsha? Were they Aryas, or were they Mlechas and Vratyas? The Shakas. We're talking about the Sakas. The Shakas or the Sakas. Our Persian neighbors, they called these people the Sakas. We call them the Shakas. So that's the Scythian people. Now, what's the origin of the Scythian people? First of all, if you read any history textbooks or any research paper in history about history, they will refer to the Scythian people as an Iranic people. Iranic people. Now, what's older, India or Iran? And where did the Iranian people come from originally? India, right? Of course, once again, a lot of historians won't agree with that, but that's okay. So the origin of the Scythian people, they lived in present-day Central Asia and Eastern Europe. This huge territory. It was called Scythia. Let's Google Scythia and see the map of what Scythia was like. The whole of the region was Scythia. Okay, huge, vast region. Come on, do we have a better way of? This is the Indo-Scythians, but yeah, this kind of is Scythia. This is the Western Steppe, actually. Shall we have to open Wikipedia? I suppose we could kind of do that. Okay, let's go to Wikipedia and try. It's essentially Central Asia and Eastern Europe. That is Scythia. So here we have north of Anatolia, this region, which is just a subset of Scythia, actually. Androphagoi means cannibals. Well, I don't think Scythians were cannibals, but whatever. The Greeks may have seen them as that. So yeah, this is a better representation of what Scythia was. And, Parthia comes much later. That is present-day Iran. Parthia comes much later, but Scythia was this region for thousands of years. So that is Scythia. Now, who were the Scythian people? What were their origins? Their origins were most likely some of these clans that ended up on the losing side in the Battle of the Ten Kings. So more than 10 clans were defeated by King Sudas in the Battle of the Ten Kings. It's the oldest battle known in human history. It's in the Rig Veda. So the clans that were defeated were ejected out of India. They were sent into permanent exile. And that was most likely the origin of the Indo-European languages going westwards out of India. One of the clans was the Parshva clan, which became the Persians. And many other clans went into Central Asia, northwards and westwards. Some of these could have ended up as the Scythians. Scythian DNA, very much of Indian origin, but eventually the Scythian DNA becomes very mixed because they met all these different different peoples of different races all across Central Asia and Eastern Europe and so on, and they intermingled with them. So eventually you have Scythian people who look like Mongols or Turks. You have Scythian people who look like Europeans with red hair or blonde hair. Then you have Scythians who look like Indians and Persians also. So because they traveled all across Central Asia and settled down all over the place for like 3, 4, 5,000 years, that's why they acquired all kinds of mixed genetics. But originally, they most likely were of Indian origin. Where the Aryas, originally they were Aryas, but eventually they became Blechas because they stopped they stopped performing Vedic rituals, I suppose, and started doing things that are not allowed in the Vedas. So eventually they became wild and they became Mlechas, I suppose. But their language remained Indo-Aryan or Indo-Iranian, right? What kind of culture did they practice? What kind of food? They would have eaten all kinds of food, I suppose. They would have eaten meat. They would have eaten fish. They were warriors. They were nomads. They were huntsmen. One of their practices was the slave trade, which is definitely not a very Arya trait. Right? If you engage in the slave trade, you cannot be called an Arya. You have to be called a Mlecha, right? So one of the things the Scythians did was engage in the slave trade in in a very profitable way. It made them very, very prosperous. And they had a lot of gold, the Scythian gold. And you have various Scythian burial sites, kurgans and all that, which are still there. And some of these burials happen in the frozen tundra and the frozen steppes of Central Asia, where the bodies don't decompose. So that's why we have Scythian bodies and Scythian tattoos. So let's take a look at that, okay? Scythian mummies. Scythian mummies. Positic burials. So this is an example of a positive burial. As you can see, this is just person has blonde hair, definitely not very Indian, right? Clearly has acquired foreign genetics. You can see this person has tattoos, right? Tattoos. Scythian warrior mummy was a 13-year-old girl. A 13-year-old girl was a warrior. Scythian mummy here. Another Scythian princess with tattoos. A Scythian gentleman with a fascinating hairstyle and the tattoos on the face. And so on. Another Scythian person. This is a Scythian lady who has European features because of intermixing. And so much more. Scythian horseman, Scythian ice maiden, Tajiks are Indo-Iranian, so that's a different story. Tari mummies is a different story, and so on and so forth. Scythian tattoos. What is that? Scythian tattoos. So interesting tattoos you can find. These are modern representations of various Scythian tattoos. Clearly a tattoo on somebody's thigh, and this is a modern person with Scythian style tattoos on their body, that sort of thing. This once again is a modern person with that. So yeah, very interesting tattoos some of these preserved bodies have. So that was a thing. Some of the Scythians engaged in slave trade. Not all, some of them did. The ones especially in Eastern Europe, they did that. Cultural similarities, well, they worshipped the sun, they were polytheistic, so cultural similarities, religious similarities. I'm not aware of them being vegetarian. They defeated the Persians on various occasions. One of the Scythian queens, Tamri, she defeated and killed Kurush, the Persian king, Cyrus, Kurush. Yeah, and yeah, long story about the Scythians. So that's about the Scythians. Okay, Amisha says several photographs of Iranian women before the Islamic invasion circulate on the internet. But I've seen people refute the view that Iran was progressive by saying that this was limited to a small, rich elite in Iran and that the great majority of women had no substantial rights. What is true is the question. It's a very good question. So let's understand Iran properly, in the right context. Not properly will take a lot of time, but in the right context. We know that Iran in the 20th century for a while was ruled by the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was a US puppet. And he sought to westernize Iran. So let's quickly Google this. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. How long did it rule? Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, years of rule. From where to where? Okay, from 1941 to 1979, and in between there was Mohammad Mossadegh, who was in power. But yeah, so let's say this gentleman ruled for 40 years. Okay, let's say he ruled for 40 years, and he was a very westernized ruler. He ruled for 40 years roughly. Before Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was very westernized and liberal, Iran was under a certain kind of, well, culture for about 1300 years. What kind of culture? Islamic culture, right? Islamic culture, Islamic religion, Sharia law, Turkic rulers who ruled Iran, not Persian rulers, but Turkic rulers who ruled over Iran for centuries. Nadir Shah was a Turk, he was not Persian. The monster who invaded India and massacred 100,000 people in one day in Delhi. He came from Iran, but he was Turkic, he was not Iranian, he was not Persian. So Iran was under the rule of Turks, just like India was under the rule of Turks for centuries. And the religion and culture that was imposed on Iran for 1300 years was non-Aryan. It was the Arabic religion and culture. And in that religion and culture, women are supposed to be covered up and all that stuff. We know how it is, right? So that is the culture that Iran has had for about 1300 years, roughly, give or take a century. That is a long time to be under that sort of religion and culture. Now, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi tries to change things, and he is then in power for 40 years. Do you think he can change everything in 40 years and completely transform the country? He can change some things in some parts of Iran. In the large cities, he can make changes. So what Pahlavi did is that he made it mandatory for Iranian women to not cover themselves with hijabs or burqas or whatever. And this was mostly seen in big cities like Tehran, Mashhad, or whatever. But in rural areas, you can't enforce this completely. So in rural areas, the 1300-year-old tradition continued, I suppose, in Iran. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi imposed some restrictions on polygamy, but did not outlaw polygamy completely. He made it legal for women to receive education. Okay, he said women can receive education, girls can receive education. And so girls did get educated in certain disciplines like nursing and whatnot, not all disciplines. But the overall Iranian society, even under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was, like they say, patriarchal, male-dominated. Women were supposed to get married at a certain age and so on and so forth. So it is in cities like Tehran and so on that women, wore mini skirts, short skirts, and Western dress, and you had ladies on the beaches of the Caspian Sea wearing swimsuits and all. You had some of that, but that was in the big cities. In the rural areas, you do not have all of that. In the rural areas, life was still pretty traditional. So the great majority of women still lived as per the old traditions, 1300-year old traditions of Iran. In the big cities, Pahlavi did try to make all these reforms, make all these changes, and women did have substantially more rights than before for about 40 years. But some of the changes that Pahlavi made were seen as very drastic, like forcing women to uncover themselves, not wear hijabs or burqas anymore. A lot of women, that's why, because of this forcible change, that's why they supported the 1979 Islamic Revolution. So it's complicated. 40 years isn't enough time to transform a country which has been under one set of laws and rules and culture for 1300 years. You can't do that, right? So yeah, you do see pictures of women in Iran who look like they're dressed in a Western way and so on, but it doesn't tell you the entire story. So the thing is, both pictures are true. Both claims are true, that women were given substantial rights in Iran, at least on paper, and the middle class women and upper class women in the big cities of Iran, they did enjoy a lot more freedom during this time. But also a lot of women chose not to, partake of these freedoms. It is especially in the rural areas. And in many parts of Iran, in the rural areas, These changes existed only on paper, but they could not be enforced. And then the traditional outlook of many people in Iran, it brought forth the Islamic Revolution, also exacerbated by the fact that Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was an American stooge. So that is the situation. That is, it was complicated. It's not a black or white kind of story. It was complex. Okay. What else do we have? Real Vladimir Putin says, was there any Christian element in colonization? Of course. Whether it is the Americas, whether it is Africa, whether it is India, there was a substantial Christian element in colonization. The Spaniards, they were out for plunder, but they justified plunder through Christianity. So they got these papal bulls, right? What was it called? I forget the name of the papal bulls, but various papal bulls. A papal bull is a declaration by the Pope that you can do certain things. So these declarations, they allowed the Spaniards to go to, there was this doctrine of terra nullis. Terra nullis. A land that is inhabited by non-Christians is an empty land, essentially. Okay? Terra nullis. Nullius. It's a Latin term meaning nobody's land. Used in international law to describe territory not under the sovereignty of any state. Historically, European powers used this concept to justify colonizing inhabited lands by declaring them legally empty or unused, disregarding indigenous populations and their land rights. So if you had a population that was not Christian, you could declare that land as terra nullius and take it. And these invaders, they would come with a lot of churchmen, missionaries, who would then take the enslaved people and convert them to Christianity. And if they converted to Christianity, they would be less brutalized. Okay, they would maybe not be tortured to death. Maybe they would just be hanged instead of being tortured to death or whatever. Yeah. So there was a very big Christian element in colonization. I mean, look at Africa today. African indigenous religions are hardly in existence now in Africa. Okay, let's see the religious religious demographics of Africa. Religious demographics, not India, Africa. Let's take a look at the map. Well, this is what we have. Okay, I think this actually makes more sense. You hardly have any indigenous religion left in Africa. It's mainly two foreign religions, right? So as you can see, there was a very Christian element in colonization, and the same applies to other parts of the world. The British colonizers came to India first for trade, but then they brought in their missionaries, who then started writing atrocity literature, and they taught that atrocity literature to us, and that's now taught to us in our education system, that our ancestors burned women alive, our religion is misogynistic, patriarchal, backward, primitive, casteist, this, that. All this atrocity literature was created by the British. They did all of that, and then this is all taught to us today, and that's why we have the UGC issue and this caste issue and all of that. Our government is simply continuing in the great tradition of the British of dividing Indian society further. So all of these horrors that exist in Indian society today, all these issues that exist in Indian society today, is because of the Indian inferiority complex that was imposed by the British, and the fact that our people, our leaders, still believe what the British taught us. And all of that, what the British taught us, was cooked up by the missionaries to create problems and divisions in India, in Indian society. The objective was to dismantle and destroy Indian civilization, which is a project that's still undergoing today. And yeah. Okay. We have crossed 2 hours and 4 minutes. Let's take maybe a couple more questions. Amisha says, what happened to the Greek settlements in India, Central Asia, and Bactria? The Greek settlements, so Alexander is said to have founded a number of cities called Alexandria in India, in Persia also. One still exists. It is Alexandria al-Iskandriya in Egypt. But apparently he founded a number of other Alexandrias in India. And I mean, those parts of India that he did kind of occupy for a while, also in Persia. So the parts of India he occupied were mainly Gandhara and Sindh and all that, right? Gandhar. So there is this Alexandria in Gandhar, the ruins of which exist. Okay, Alex. Okay. Give me a second. Alexandria in Gandhara. Ah, what was it called? It was called Al Ain Al something. Alex, what is it called today? Gandhara. Tajikistan border. Tajikistan border. What was it called? I forget the name. Al something. Okay, Afghanistan, Tajikistan border. Afghanistan, Tajikistan border. Greek ruined city. What is it called? Ay Khanum. Finally, Ay Khanum, right? Ay Khanum. So Khanum. So if you go to the map, you will find Ay Khanum, and it's on the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. And you can actually see the satellite image of this. You can see that it's a nicely well laid out city. It used to be, but it no longer exists. So this city was founded allegedly by Alexander. Okay, and it was in existence even after the demise of the Seleucid Empire. So what happened to Greek settlements like these? You had Greek settlements in Gandhara, in Kashmir, in Punjab, etc. What happened to these Greek settlements? Well, they continued. Some of these became independent city states. Some of these became part of the Indo-Greek kingdoms. Some of these were in Bactria, which is northwest Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. That is Bactria. That was also extended India, right? So you had Greco-Bactrian kingdoms there, which were Indianized eventually. And you had the Indo-Greek kingdoms, which were in proper Gandhar, which is Afghanistan, and also Kashmir and northern Punjab, all of that. And the Greek people were a small minority in these regions, and eventually they became Indianized. Eventually they lost political power, but they continued existing there, living there, and they eventually married into the Indian population and became Indianized, and eventually their descendants will not even know that they are of Greek origin. And eventually the Greek cities, some of those were abandoned, some of these continue. For example, you have a city called Junagadh in Saurashtra, which allegedly was originally Yavanagad, which was a Greek settlement. It is said that the city of Sialkot in Punjab, currently temporarily in Pakistan, it was Shakala or something, which was the capital city of Menander. So some of these cities still exist. Some of the cities got abandoned for whatever reason, and the people simply assimilated into the Indian society. And their descendants will today not even know that they have some fractional Greek ancestry. Right. Still have some more questions, but maybe I should now go and see what questions we have in the chat. Okay, I can see we have 26 super chats. That will be a while to take those. So please stop taking super chats and let me go through the super chats now. Okay. Sagnik Acharya has become a new member. Thank you so much, sir, for becoming a member. Welcome to the channel, and thank you very much. Okay, Uchiha says, when you refer to multipolar world, you always mention the year 2016 with respect to the US losing unipolarity. What really happened during that time? Thank you. When did I mention 2016 with the US losing unipolarity? It's more like 2012, more like 2008. It's not 2016. See, the unipolar moment for the US started in 1989, 1990. That's when the USSR disintegrates. Okay, that's the disintegration of the USSR when there's only one superpower left, the US. So for about 20 years, they were the only hegemon in the world. Then you have the banking crisis 2008, and the Chinese decided that now is our time to start becoming a little more assertive. In 2012, Xi Jinping comes to power, and then suddenly you have this wolf warrior diplomacy of China. So China starts baring its fangs, So it's 2012 that the US suddenly realizes that China is not what we expected it to become. We thought China, if it becomes prosperous, it will become a democracy. But now we are seeing China baring its fangs against us. China is behaving like a wannabe imperial power. So the unipolar movement ends around 2012, not 2016. 2016 is Donald Trump coming to power for the first time. No, that's not it. It's 2012. The period between 2008 to 2012 is when China changed, or at least that's the period when China stopped hiding its strength and biding its time. It's 2000 in 2012. Xi Jinping comes to power and he says it's enough now. We have hidden our strength enough. We have bid our time enough. Now let's show who we really are. Maybe it was premature of him to do that. But yeah, it's around 2012 that you see a change in the attitude and behavior of China. And that's when we can say that there's the beginning of a multipolar world, kind of. Brown Leprechaun says, historically, why did many countries expel Jews? Well, you see, Jews, first of all, let me tell you this before I talk about other countries. Jews have been in India for about 2,100 years. About 100 BC is when you have the first Jews who get shipwrecked on Indian shores, and they were allowed to settle down in India. And they lived in India for 2,100 years. And then you had multiple more waves of Jews who came into India and settled into India. One of these migrations to India was after the Maccabean riot, right? Maccabean revolt against the Roman rule over Judea, Roman occupation of Judea, and the destruction of the Second Temple of Solomon. And a number of Jews escaped and fled to India. And they also settled down in India, and you had multiple other migrations of Jews to India. So Jews have been living in India for about 2,100 years at least. India never expelled Jews. India never oppressed Jews. Jews were allowed to keep on practicing their indigenous, their original religion. Jews were never asked to convert or to change their lifestyle or whatever. So India never did that to the Jews. Okay, India has never shown any kind of anti-Semitism to the Jews ever. When it comes to other countries, let's say European countries, Jews have lived in Europe for about 2,000 years, I would say, roughly, and they have been persecuted all over the place. Every single European kingdom, country, empire has persecuted Jews. And Jews have been accused of all kinds of nasty things. In some countries in Europe, they accuse Jews of poisoning the wells. So whenever there is an outbreak of plague because the Europeans are dirty and they don't take bath, they accuse Jews of poisoning the wells. So you are poisoning the wells and we are drinking from the wells, and that's why we are getting the plague. And that's why we are all dying out. So the Jews are responsible for that. And they would then go and massacre Jews. Then they would accuse Jews of some blood libel or something, drinking blood of children or something. Okay, so that's another thing that Jews were accused of doing. Another thing that they would accuse Jews of doing was of hoarding wealth and stealing gold and clipping coins and whatnot. So these accusations were all over Europe, but never in India. If the Jews are truly so evil as the Europeans have claimed for 2,000 years, how come the Jews were never accused of these things in India? How come? So it makes no sense. It makes no sense. These were all lies, clearly. Because if Jews are so evil as the Europeans claimed, then they would have been as evil as that in India also. But they never did a thing in India. They were the best guests for 2,000 years in India. So clearly the Europeans were lying. Or otherwise we are lying and we were tolerating this nonsense. Clearly we were not. So these are the reasons why the Jews were persecuted, oppressed, massacred, pogromed, genocided over and over and over and over again in Europe. In Spain, it's a whole different set of reasons. After the Reconquista, even the Jews were expelled from Spain, and many of them, those Jews came and settled in India. Some of them at least, and so on. Yeah. Krishant Bordoloy says, some Polish MPs were saying Epstein was a KGB agent. Yeah, they try and push everything on Russia. Very funny. It won't work this time. Yeah, Epstein was a Russian agent. Haha, KGB agent. Very, very funny. MK says, bought most of the books you recommended and absolutely loved them. Please keep the recommendations coming, at least 5 books a week. Well, if that is something you all would want from me, I could keep doing recommendations. Maybe 5 books a week. Anyway, I'm so glad that you actually bought the books and read the books I recommended and you loved them. Very happy to hear this. And I'll be happy to recommend more. So thank you. Geo Warrior says, why can't Trump use the NATO framework to protect Greenland from Chinese or Russian influence instead of trying to invade it? Well, Trump, there's a there's an element of megalomania to Trump. There's an element of ego to Trump, isn't it? Trump isn't out there to protect everybody. Trump is out there to prove to the world how great he is. He wants to be remembered as the greatest, biggest, baddest American president of all time. Bad as in Muhammad Ali bad. I'm the baddest man on the world, on the planet, that sort of thing. Baddest as in greatest. So Trump wants to be remembered as the greatest American president. One of the ways to be remembered as the greatest president is by expanding American territory. How many American presidents have done that? Very few. There's the Louisiana purchase, there's the Alaska purchase, and that's about it. How about the Greenland purchase or the Greenland acquisition? So he doesn't see all these stories he's telling about Russian influence, Chinese influences. These are just excuses. He just wants to expand American territory. So that's what he's actually after. Harshay says, what diet Rajputs, Maratha, and Mughals used to have, and what gave them stamina to fight the wars for months and months, and what workouts they used to do? We have no idea, because none of this was recorded. I suppose, look, do we have any workout routines that have been preserved? No. As far as I know, we don't know what workouts they did. Obviously, the Rajputs and Marathas would obviously practice sword fighting. They would practice horse riding. They would practice various martial arts. They would do that. They would not go to the gym and lift weights and do, military presses and lateral raises and deadlifts and all. They would not do that. They would do more functional exercises, like actual fighting, martial arts. That's what Marathas and Rajputs would have done. The Rajput art of sword fighting is almost extinct. Some of it you can still see in dance forms. The Gujarati Dandiya dance, Dandiya Ras, it actually originates in Rajput sword fighting, Kshatriya sword fighting, right? Sword fighting. And so on. So some of that kind of survives. But what diet would they have had? The Rajputs definitely ate a lot of meat. Marathas, I suppose they also ate meat. But what specific diets did they have, diet plan and all, we don't know. So can't really answer because we have lost all the records. The Mughals, I am no expert in Mughal history, so I can't say, sorry. Ishank Bareja says, do you think a $10 or $15 trillion economy will solve the problems of pollution, women's safety, and town level infrastructure? You can solve these problems even today with a $4 trillion economy. You just need the right leadership. Even if you become a $20 trillion economy, you still won't be able to solve the issue of pollution, infrastructure, dirt, dust, garbage, lack of civic sense, all of that. You won't be able to solve it if the country remains allegedly corrupt and with poor leadership, allegedly. Even with a $4 trillion economy, you can solve these problems. Pollution, of course, that is easier said than done, because if you want to develop if you are a developing economy, if you want to become a massive industrial power, you've got to pollute a bit. There's no other way out of it. Look at London in the 1950s and 60s. They could not breathe the air in London. The US was super polluted until the 1970s and 80s. Then they exported all of their trash and garbage and pollution to third world countries. That's why the US is so clean today. So you can't really solve all the problems, but when it comes to civic sense, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to women's safety, overall India is very safe for women, more safer than many Western countries. But there are some parts of India where you have issues. Now, why is that? I'll not go into that. Why some parts of India have issues, we'll not go into that. But all of this can be solved with just the right leadership. Died with Prigozhin says, did you see the clip of Zohran Mamdani in which he claimed that Modi slaughtered Muslims in Gujarat to such an extent that there are no Muslims left in Gujarat anymore? Continued, I have not seen that. Continued, despite Gujarat having more Muslims than the entire US, non-id audience fact-checked that and instead started clapping. Is the US turning into a more and more propaganda society? See, this Mamdani guy is an enemy of India. Okay? His mother was of Indian origin, is of Indian origin, Punjabi. Nair. Meera Nair. Whatever. But Zohran is more of a Pakistani than an Indian. He hates India. and he makes all these false claims, accusations, and his audience is the lefties of the US. And the US also has this pol- policy of containing India, and they have no great love for India. India is this evil polytheistic culture, right? How dare India still exist? How dare this polytheistic culture still exist? So whatever propaganda will be thrown against India, they will lap it up and they'll applaud that. So yeah, it's definitely a highly propagandized society. Western media is just propaganda. The best form of propaganda is 97% truth and 3% lies sprinkled in like salt. That's the best form of propaganda, and that's what the US excels at. So it is a very propagandized society for sure. Yes. Ayush Ayush Gigu says, big fan of yours. Thank you. Been following you since your Chinggis Khan video back in 2021. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, very much indeed. Taking inspiration from you, I am also currently creating AI videos telling the stories from Raja Tarangini. I hope to meet you someday and talk about everything. I would love to. Well, that is a great initiative you have taken. I really appreciate people who create things, who create something. You got to start from somewhere. So you are creating AI videos telling the stories from the Raj Tarangini. AI is a great tool if used properly, if used well, if used for the right purposes. Uh, it has given us so much freedom uh, and creative and so much of a creative outlet to people who otherwise would not have had the creative tools to do things. So I am very happy that you are doing this. Please continue that. Stories from Kalahana's Rajatarangini. Kalahana was a Kashmiri historian and chronicler from about 1,000 years ago. And he wrote the Rajatarangini, which is a chronicle of all the kings of Kashmir and India up to the time of his existence. And very interesting stories you'll find in there. So yeah, you're telling stories from that. So I'm really glad that you're doing that. Thank you very much for having been a long time follower. And I certainly hope to meet you myself in the future someday and discuss what we're doing. So thank you so much, and I wish you the greatest of success. Thank you, Ayush. Kratos Arya Vartavasi says, how did Indo-Iranian Central Asia, excluding Tajikistan, become Turkic by culture and massive genetic replacement? Give statistics and further readings. I don't have statistics right now with me. I'm doing a live interaction with you all. How will I have statistics? But I'll tell you how it happened. How did this happen? So, like we discussed a few minutes ago in the question about Scythia and the Scythians, the whole of Central Asia was once called Scythia for several thousand years. It was inhabited by this continuum of nomadic peoples who all had the same original culture, which was Indian culture, Indo-Aryan culture, Aryan culture. And they eventually moved, all settled in various parts of Central Asia, and they practiced various kinds of lifestyles. They intermingled with various Central Asian, uh, uh, you know, uh, population groups. Some started looking Mongolic, some started looking European, some had blonde hair, some had white skin, some had more Eastern Asian features. Many of them had Indian and Iranian Persian features, and so on. So that was Scythia, mostly of Indo-Iranian origin, these people. Then what happened is about 2,500 years ago, there was a sudden eruption from present day Mongolia, this sudden outward eruption of this new ethnic group, the Huns. The Huns were essentially the ancestors of the Turkic peoples as well as the Mongolic peoples. The Huns suddenly explode out of Mongolia and go westwards, northwards, in all directions. And they then start these khanates and khaganates in various parts of Central Asia, etc. And they defeated the Scythians and replaced and displaced the Scythians to a large extent in Central Asia, the Huns. And at the time when we had the Gupta Empire in India and you had the Huns attempting to invade India, they launched wave after wave of invasion of India during the time when Skandagupta was our emperor. At that same time, the Huns were trying to invade Rome successfully. So that's how widespread the Huns became. And they were so powerful and so on that they essentially displaced and replaced the Scythians. So if you look at the inhabitants of nations like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, etc. today, they will have some Scythian ancestry and a lot of Turkic ancestry. If you go to East Turkestan or so-called Xinjiang today, present day occupied by China, the people there are like 50% Indian, 50% Turkic. Okay, the people of Xinjiang. For example, let's take a look at the people of Kashgar. Okay, let's see. Kashgar people. What do they look like? As you can see, they look like half Indian, half Turkic. Right? That's the people of Kashgar. Some will look more Turkic, some will look more Indian, some will even look, more Tajiki or whatever. So, Uyghur people, how about them? Uyghur. So once again, Uyghur people will show all these different kinds of phenotypes. They will look like a mix between Indians and Europeans and Turks. So that's essentially what happened. Typically, the Uyghurs, their female ancestry will be Indo-Scythian, male ancestry will be Turkic. Statistics and further readings, you can look it up yourself. I don't have this off the tip of my tongue, but yeah. Dheeraj Kamath says, on your podcast with Suresh Chavhanke, he claimed that the US and China are the same entity, two sides of the same coin. Could you explain this? Look, he can explain this. I can't explain what my guests say. I am not responsible for everything my guests claim. I'm not necessarily going to agree with everything my guests say. I give them a platform because they are important people. They have valuable perspectives and insights. But I may not necessarily agree with everything they say. Right? So I don't remember exactly what he may have claimed. And if you want an explanation, he should be the one giving the explanation, not me. Right? I can't explain that. Vinit says, if Iran falls, Russia exhausts, China in India burn in war under US direction by 2047, could Anglo rule rise openly, democracy fading, London crowned, Queen Mother aura, Lucy Lawless style? Well, that's a fascinating picture you've painted over here. If Iran falls, Russia exhausts, and China and India go to war. Why? Why? If Iran falls, why will China and India go to war? If Iran falls, it makes even less sense for India and China to go to war. If Iran falls, why will Russia get exhausted? If Iran falls, how does it logically lead to the consequences that you've outlined here? Russia gets exhausted, China and India go to war under US direction. China and India will be suicidal if they go to war under US direction. Yeah. Iran could fall. The Americans have the capability to make Iran fall for sure. But if that happens, it is even more likely that RIC come together rather than going to war with each other. So, Iran, if it hypothetically falls, it doesn't logically give rise to the scenarios that you have painted. And so I certainly hope that doesn't happen. Dheeraj Kamath says, it appears that the US and its master use occult practices ranging from benign, which is remote viewing, to barbaric, which is human sacrifices, to attain geopolitical miracles. Now, remote viewing is something that we hear that the CIA and whoever, they had programs to develop these capabilities in some people or whatever, remote viewing and astral projection and whatnot. I haven't looked into these things. There are these horrific programs like MK Ultra and whatnot. Once again, I've not studied in detail, but I've heard very, very horrible things about those things. Human experimentation on their own people and so on. All kinds of nasty things they did to their own people. And it looks like the current American rich and famous and powerful people, they practice various barbaric things like pedophilia and child whatever else, right? The Epstein file stuff. But is it with the objective of attaining geopolitical miracles, or is it some other set of objectives? I don't know. I simply look, this is a culture that is alien to me. This is not Indian culture. This is Western culture. I am not an expert. I'm in this aspect of Western culture. This is obviously something utterly barbaric. So why are they doing it? Will it really, does it actually give rise to geopolitical miracles? I'm not sure about that. But it's something that I don't understand. So Namit Rana says, if Iran falls, isn't whole energy will be put on India via covert and overt two-front war in internal problems? Will we deal with it? Are we going South Africa way to surrender our nukes or have iron fist? If Iran falls, isn't whole energy will be put on India via covert and overt two-front war in internal problems? I am not able to understand the cause and effect between this and that. If Iran falls, whole energy, okay. Oh, you don't mean energy as in oil. You're talking about America's focus and energy and attention will be now focused on India, covered and overt. Yeah, a lot more. If Iran is made to fall and the US gets to control Iran after that, after regime change, then they will be really free to focus on India and China and Russia. Only three big pieces left. And the easiest piece will be India, not Russia, not China. So yeah, not two front, like 5-front war they will do on India. Internally. Right? Can India deal with it? It will be difficult for India to deal with it. If Iran falls, it becomes more likely that India will get vassalized. Surrender nukes or not, which way we get vassalized is a different story. But if Iran falls, it is really, really bad for India, which is why Iran must not fall. But it's not in our hands. It's not in our hands. We can't even stop a regime change in Pakistan, East Pakistan, West Pakistan, or Nepal. So how can we stop a regime change in Iran? All we can do is become more resilient internally, but for that we need reforms in India. Where are the reforms in India? We are seeing more divisions in Indian society being created by the government. What can I say? Vidhi Manyar says, Sir, how can you say no trade deal has been signed? I say it because I have not seen any signing of trade deal. Okay, I don't know what. Okay, let's ask Google this. Okay, has a India-EU trade deal been signed? Yes, the India and EU announced the conclusion of negotiations for a comprehensive free trade agreement, and this has been signed. Has a India-US trade deal been signed? Arey bhai. Signed, question mark. Where's your Google AI? What happened to the Google AI? It died. Did it? Okay, let's go to AI mode. Has a India-US trade deal been signed? A landmark trade deal has been agreed upon in principle. A formal legal agreement has not yet been signed. It has not been signed. Something has been agreed upon in principle, whatever that means. It is not a legal thing. You have to have the agreement being signed on paper by both sides. That's why I say it has not been signed, because it has not been signed. Vidiji, how do you imagine it has been signed? Where have you seen the signing ceremony? Because Donald Trump tweeted something, does it mean it has been signed? Has the Indian Minister of Trade or the Indian Prime Minister put pen on paper and signed some kind of legal document? He has not. That's why I say it has not been signed. How have you been imagining that something has been signed? You got to pay more attention, ma'am. Financial advisor says, why was Indian rupee devalued in 1966? I don't remember. Look it up. It was devalued. It did have a bad effect on India, but why did Mrs. Gandhi do that? I don't remember right now. We can look it up. ICMB says, why did the Rajiv Gandhi's IPKF fail in Sri Lanka? The IPKF, Indian Peacekeeping Force, was the Indian military, the professional military. It was sent into Sri Lanka to do the job of a police force. Professional soldiers and the professional military, when do they succeed? They succeed when you have a clear mission with a clear objective and a clear time frame. Go to so-and-so place, do so-and-so thing in these many hours and get the hell out. That is a military operation. Or you go, do so-and-so thing, hold the place, and then further reinforcements will come and so on and so forth. That's a military operation. That's what the military is designed to do. They were given no military mission, no clear objectives, no rules of engagement. Just go and be there. Go and be there. And lots of things you can't do. You can't shoot at civilians. You can't shoot at so on and so forth. And what's the definition of a hostile operative? There was so much ambiguity. There was no clarity. And essentially, the army was just asked to go and be there. Go and be there. But don't do anything, essentially. That doesn't work. So because of mismanagement, because of extremely poor leadership, that's why the mission failed. Godliness says, Indian state is blessed with tourist attractions. It's full of wonders, but sadly, behavior of some individuals towards foreign and even domestic tourists is very unwelcoming, especially for women. Why do we have issues in India? Why do we have poor civic sense? Why do we have people who have this massive inferiority complex? Why do we have some people who behave badly in public, who behave badly towards tourists, and so on and so forth? Why is that? Why is the quality of the population so poor on average? Why is that? First of all, there's the issue of illegal infiltrators who are on Indian territory. They will not share our culture. First of all, that's one aspect of the problem. There are millions of them. In 2016, Shri Kiran Rijiju said in Parliament that there are at least 20 crore Bangladeshis in India. 2016. Today is 2026. 20 crore is, sorry, not 20 crore, 2 crore. That's 20 million. 20 million. Imagine the chaos. How many Rohingyas do we have? How many cookies do we have? What else do we have? Pakistanis. That's one aspect of the problem. Many of these people are the people who create the problems and make India look bad, even though they are not Indian. The other thing is the average Indian person is the Indian population overall, on average, is of low quality. Poor behavior, poor civic sense, poor this, poor that, poor everything, low standards. Why? The quality of your population depends on the quality of your goddamned education system. India's education system is garbage. It is trash. That's why we have a very poor quality population. That's the answer. To solve these issues, you have to fix the education system. Teach these things from the time you are 5 years old. Teach civic sense in practice. Teach good behavior in practice, not by writing essays. In practice. Right? The quality of your population depends on the quality of your education system. Your new education policy is not going to solve any of your problems. Godliness says, what is the history of tourism? Did it start with trade or just expedition? I don't know the history of tourism. Tourism historically would have had tirthayatras in India, I suppose. India was full of these pilgrimage places. And even in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, there are accounts of tirthayatras. That is a form of religious tourism, isn't it? Many of these tirthayatras happened by crossing forests, which was very difficult. Some of the tirthayatras happened by sailing on rivers, which was very pleasant. So I think tourism happens only when you have wealthy populations. And in the ancient world, the wealthiest population was in India. So I suppose India would have been the place where tourism first started. And foreigners would come to India as immigrants, not as tourists. But Indians would travel the subcontinent in maybe if they were wealthy and they wanted to see different cities, or maybe if they wanted to, for example, do pilgrimages. If you are living in, let's say, southern India, but you want to visit the great Jyotirlinga of Kailash. Not Kailash. The Kailash is the mountain. But even Kailash mountain in Tibet. I mean, that's religious tourism. So I suppose that could be the origins, but the history, I'm not really sure. Okay, CS19 Jai Hind says, hello, the trade deal announced. It's not announced. It is claimed. Nothing has been signed. Nothing has been signed. Some announcement was made by Trump, but he has made an announcement which is unacceptable to India. Where has it been signed? Something was announced. Even Modi said some nice words, but nothing has actually been inked. Okay, so you've been noticing the past 5-6 months of Trump drama. It has exposed several prominent Indian Americans who claim to support India but kept on undermining the government of India. These Indian Americans, ask yourself one question. What passport do they hold? They hold the American passport, not the Indian passport. They are citizens of a foreign country. They may have the same blood as you. They may have the same ancestors as you, the same origins, the same accent as you. but they are American citizens. They will support their country. Unlike the Israeli Americans who support Israel more than the US, possibly, some of them at least, Indian Americans will talk nice things, say nice things about India, but their actions will all be either neutral or essentially not very beneficial to India. Please understand one thing. If you want to understand a person, what they truly are all about, ignore their words and focus only on their actions. That will show you the truth of a person. So, yeah, it has exposed several prominent Indian Americans, and lots of Indians are all heartbroken about it. Why? Why are you heartbroken? Be realistic about the world. Everyone is selfish. People will support you only if you're powerful. India needs to get more powerful. The Indian Americans, most of them are fair weather friends. Not all, but most of them. Yeah, but once again, my point is this trade deal has not been signed. Trump has made an announcement. If India agrees to the claims he has made in the announcement, we become a vassal state. So obviously we will not go along with that. So the trade deal has not been signed. There are still differences between the two sides on the trade deal. What Trump wants, we can't give him. So I don't think it's going to happen very soon, the trade deal. A YT user says, why do you think the landscaping is so poor in India? I live in an expensive part of Bangalore, yet broken sidewalk, uncovered dirt and dust everywhere. All cities look like a war-torn place. It is so sad. Okay, now I will not talk about Bangalore. I will say, imagine some hypothetical metropolitan city in India, which actually is fictional. Okay, I'm not talking about any real city. I'm talking about, let's say we have some hypothetical metropolitan city in India. And it's a fantastic place, as in all these multinational corporations are there, very highly salaried people live there, but it's horribly congested. The streets are very narrow. There's dust everywhere. There is cement dust everywhere. There is natural dust everywhere. There is trash everywhere. The sidewalks are uncovered. There's no lawns or grass anywhere. Everything looks like a war-torn place. There's no traffic rules. There are slums all over the place, illegal slums on public land. Why is it like this? Why is it like this in this completely hypothetical, fictitious city of India? Why is it like this? Well, my answer is corruption. That's it. I'm not talking about Bangalore, okay? I'm talking about a hypothetical, fictional city. Naveen Chauhan says, first time after independence, we are witnessing such anger and resentment in the whole Hindi heartland, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, New Delhi, from general category. Is 25% population's crime is that they don't protest, unite, and transactional? Is it a crime to be part of the general category? The crime is caste-based reservations. That is the crime against India. It's a crime against Indian civilization. The objective of any good leader should be to unite people and to remove the artificial differences that have been inserted in our society, not to make the differences worse, not to exacerbate the differences. A leader's job is to unite, not divide. So the crime is caste-based reservation. Being born in certain category is not a crime. Right? This is terrible what we are seeing. I'm not saying that this anger and resentment is terrible. I'm saying that these new rules that are being brought in to further divide Indian society and to paint the general category as permanent oppressors and the other categories as permanent victims, that is a crime. That is apartheid. India is a Hindu-phobic apartheid state. That is the crime. Feels Strong Man says, recent Jayesh Gangan podcast was your best in last 6 months. Reminds me of good old TRS podcasts. Raise the sharp Q&A and avoid repetitive questions that you answer here every week. I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, I've done a bunch of podcasts recently. I thought, let me go and accept a few invitations, and yes, it was fun. And Jayesh was a great host, so I'm glad you liked it. Thank you. Godliness says, when geopolitics becomes a tool for domestic political PR, you do injustice towards your country. Indo-US trade deal is just one adjusted business contract, slightly tilting towards US and no masterstroke. There is no US-India trade deal thus far. Nothing has been signed. I don't know why. I think your media has made you think that a trade deal has been signed. I don't think it is the fault of Indian people that they believe that trade deal has been signed and it is already, in force. I think it is your YouTubers, it is your news readers, it is your media that is misleading you. There is no trade deal as of today. Trump has made some claims. Modi put out a tweet, thanking him, but not agreeing to any of those things. Where's the trade deal? So this trade deal doesn't exist as of today. There's no trade deal. What Trump has claimed is a very unequal, unbalanced trade deal, which we simply can't accept. If we accept it, then we go back to the old East India Company days. We can't accept it. The trade deal has not happened. It has not been signed. It is your stupid media, your stupid news readers, your stupid YouTubers who are misleading you all. Soldier Boy says, Sar, tell us about the dark forest theory. Imagine you are living in a gigantic forest, very thick forest, trees everywhere, and trees which are very high, very tall, and very thick vegetation up there in the trees, so thick that very little sunlight comes down to the floor of the forest, of the jungle. You live in the jungle. There are all kinds of dangerous animals in the jungle. There are tigers and scary cats and tigers and snakes and hyenas and God knows what other species of scary predators exist there. Now, let's say you are a person who lives in this forest. Does it make sense to advertise your existence? Hey, listen, everybody, I'm here. Does it make sense? No, they'll come and eat you, right? So what you do if you live in a dark forest is you stay hidden, you stay quiet, you live your life very quietly. You don't advertise your existence. You do that in a dark forest, in a scary dark forest. We live in the solar system, on a small, unregarded little planet on the solar system, in the solar system. The entire universe out there is like a dark forest. Who knows what kind of scary species of aliens live out there? Do you want to advertise your existence? Hey guys, I'm here, we are here, listen, we are here, please come pay us a visit. Does it make sense? If they are able to, if they have the capability to cross interstellar space, thousands of light years and visit you, do you think they will let you live in peace? Their capabilities will be way ahead of yours technologically, right? It doesn't make sense for you to advertise your existence to somebody who's so technologically more advanced than you. No. Maybe your planet has resources they seek. Maybe you are a nuisance for them then. Stay hidden. Behave like you are a timid little species in a dark forest. That's the dark forest theory. Vihang Khurane says, I'm very well. How are you, sir? Vihang. Why did Buddhism in India evolve towards such strong emphasis on ahimsa, while in other regions Buddhist traditions seem to have evolved in alignment with local martial arts or indigenous traditions? Why did that happen is the question. Why did Buddhism focus so much on ahimsa? Even in Tibet, Buddhism has focused on ahimsa, which is why Tibet is now under Chinese occupation, right? But if you look at Japan, for example, the samurai are classified as Buddhist, right? They did not eat meat. They only ate fish. They abhorred beef. Beef eating was taboo in Japan. But they were warriors. They had this warrior ethos code called Bushido, right? The samurai. And they were frighteningly good warriors. The ninjas were also Buddhist, classified as Buddhist. So how come Buddhism allowed that in Japan, but in India it was ahimsic? What about Thailand? In Thailand, the national martial art is the sepak. No, not sepak takraw. Sorry, Thai kick. What is it called? Muay Thai. Muay Thai, right? I mean, that is a pretty violent sport. It's a Buddhist sport. In Cambodia, you have Cambodian blood sport, which is a very violent martial art. And so, why is it that in India we have such a very ahimsa oriented Buddhism? I'm not really sure. Beats me. Why is it like that? And that obviously led to the very rapid fall of Gandhar, because Gandhar was primarily Buddhistic when the Ghoris thing, when the Turks came and invaded, right? So wherever you had Buddhism, there was a very rapid fall to the invaders and a very rapid conversion to Islam. But where you had the other forms of Dharma, like Hinduism, uh, did not work that well. I'm not sure why Indian Buddhism evolved towards ahimsa so strongly. Not sure. Maybe we. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert in Buddhism, and I don't really know why it was this way. Anyway, Sam the Gamer says, please restart Insightful Geostrategy show. It was a gem, diamond. Really? You all want me to do that? I could take it seriously, perhaps. Restarting it. Okay. Dark Side of the Moon, DSOTM says, you said Jews were India's best guests, but the Sassoon family got rich from British colonialism and opium trade. Explain the role and how it fits. It doesn't really fit, does it? Well, look, there are always exceptions. Why don't you people understand that statistically what I am saying is correct, but there is always going to be some outliers statistically. The Sassoons came from Baghdad. They were Baghdadi Jews that came much later. They were not the Jews that came 2100 years ago. They were not the Jews that came to India in the aftermath of the Roman destruction of the Second Temple of Solomon. They were not the Jews that came in the aftermath of the expulsion of the Sephardic Jews from Iberia after the Reconquista. The Baghdadi Jews were from Iraq, from Baghdad, and they were brought in by the British occupiers of India. So the Sassoons are outliers. They're not statistically part of the group of Jews I'm talking about. There's always some exceptions. But please understand that statistically what I have said is absolutely correct. The Europeans made all these horrific claims about the Jews. The Jews were poisoning wells. The Jews were drinking blood of people. The Jews were clipping coins. Did the Jews do any of that in India? The Sassoons are an exception. Statistically, you will say that India is a very peaceful nation, but you still have criminals in India, right? But does it mean that a few criminals makes India a criminal society? Please think of it in a proper way. There's always going to be some exceptions to anything you say. But that doesn't prove anything. So the Sassoons have their own story. The Sassoons did plenty of nasty stuff. No question about that. Dine with Prigozhin says, Mearsheimer said US unipolarity ended in 2017. What's my opinion? I would say it started in 2008 to 2012. Professor John Mearsheimer has his own views. That's fine. The way I see it, the situation changed between 2008 to 2012. 2012, we have the sudden emergence of China, in the sense that China abandoned its hide and bite policy. It said, now we are the big deal. We are wolf warriors, and we will no longer take everything lying down. We're going to give it back. So and they did this because they knew that they now mattered, the Chinese, right? So in 2014, you have the Russians now taking a stand in Crimea. So I think between 2008 to 2012-14, that's when unipolarity ended. Brown Leprechaun says, a short video on Muslim Brotherhood, please. I am no expert on the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't study these topics, so I am not the right person for this. I don't know about the Muslim Brotherhood. I, of course, know the basics. Al-Azhar University, Al-Qaeda, and so on, but I'm no expert on this. And it's not a topic that interests me a lot, this one. So maybe not this one, maybe something else. But anyway, thank you for the recommendation. Aaron says, around 2008, China had the same GDP as what India has today. Yet we seem to not have as good infrastructure. Why is that the case? Answer, once again, alleged corruption. Democracy. Leadership. These are the answers. These are the problems which have ensured that despite having the same GDP essentially as China, we are so far behind what the Chinese were in terms of infrastructure in 2008. How can we change that? By changing the system, by eliminating the alleged corruption, and by having better leadership. Lack of vision, also lack of vision. It's a combination of democracy, alleged corruption. I'm not talking about the top leadership. I'm talking about state level, city level, municipal level leadership, and lack of vision. That's the problems. So how do you change this? You crack the whip and you punish anybody who is guilty of even the slightest corruption. They punish them in the harshest way, where the Chinese would punish them possibly, or maybe not, whatever. Guaranteed punishment. That's the solution. Okay, Abhirup Sarkar says, is Indian spirituality sometimes adopted as a way to avoid confronting reality rather than engaging with it? A lot of people may possibly think of it that way. A lot of people will think that, Indian spirituality is about becoming passive, becoming non-interactive with the world, retreating into a shell, escaping from reality. Right? See, a lot of Indian spirituality is about meditation, closing your eyes, retreating into the inner world, inner consciousness, forgetting about the world. The objective is to attain nirvana, the end of the cycle of rebirths. It's all about getting rid of your attachments. Sounds very renunciative of the real world, right? It sounds like it's all about detaching from reality, escaping from reality. The truth is that it is indeed the case that Indian spirituality says that this is the highest thing you should aspire for. But it also says it's not for everybody. It's maybe for 1 or 2% of the population. Most people aren't built for this. So there are other ways of being spiritual, right? It's not just about Hatha Yoga. No, Hatha Yoga is about asanas and postures. It's not just about Raj Yoga. It's also about Bhakti Yoga. It's also about Kriya Yoga. It's also about Jnana Yoga. You can do there are different ways of becoming more spiritual. You can become more spiritual by being more engaged with the world, but in an ethical and moral way, in a dharmic way. So it's, you see, the way these so-called fake gurus like Deepak Chopra and all, they explain his spirituality, it's in a very, very distorted way. You can be a warrior and be spiritual. What did Shri Krishna tell Arjun? Go kill them all. Don't escape. Don't try to escape and run away from your duty. Do your job. Do your duty. Go kill them all. They are your cousins. Kill them all. That is that's your duty. That's your karma. Right? Even by doing that, by doing your duty, you can be spiritual. So Indian spirituality is way more nuanced and complex than this one-dimensional BS that Deepak Chopra types are peddling to the world. Died with Prigozhin says, moral collapse if Iran sunk Australian carrier with multiple missiles. Moral collapse if Iran sunk Australian carrier with multiple missiles. Has that happened? Or are you painting a hypothetical scenario? Iran, Australia. What happened? Has something happened? No such thing has happened. Okay. Yeah. So no such thing has happened, but the Iranians are certainly capable of taking out a carrier with multiple missiles. It would potentially collapse the morale somewhere, I suppose. Krishant Bordoloy says, Mamdani should focus on finding who his dad is. Very naughty statement you're making there. His mommy was married to a gentleman called Epstein, right? A different Epstein, but she was involved in some way or the other with the Epstein files. Her name does figure in that stash of documents. So yeah, I suppose I would tend to agree with you, Krishant, that Mamdani should focus on finding who his actual dad is. Kratos says, are Aryans and Turks the greatest Eurasian conquerors? The greatest conquerors are the people who belong to this extended family which carries the genetic mutation associated with the haplogroup R1A1A. Okay? R1A1A. This is the most successful extended family in human history. What does this say, AI? Major ancient Y chromosome lineage, widespread across Eurasia, particularly prevalent in the Indian subcontinent, up to 72% of Bengali Brahmins, Gujarati Lohanas, and Eastern Europe, and so on. Okay. So this is where R1A1A is prevalent. More than 1 billion men today are part of this extended family. And more than 1 billion men, they are descended from one single person who lived about 27,000 years ago, most likely in the Indian subcontinent. This is the most successful extended family in human history, the greatest conquerors. It is not a Turkic family. They call it the Aryan gene, which is a very wrong way of saying things, of characterizing it. But yes, it seems to be associated with the spread of the Indo-European languages. So it's definitely not Turkic, it's Aryan. Hani Sharma says, why are we not able to build a real Iron Man suit? It is impossible to produce so much power in such a compact suit. Why can we not use nuclear power? Well, if you want to use nuclear power, you would need a nuclear reactor. The best nuclear reactors weigh several tons. A human being can't carry something that weighs several tons. Even 50 kilograms carrying that is, for a long time, it's difficult, right? And then if you have a nuclear reactor, how does a nuclear reactor generate power? By driving a steam engine. Okay. A steam engine has a lot of water and a very high temperature and very high pressures. How do you fit all of that into an Iron Man suit? You can't. Okay, so we're talking about nuclear fission here. What about nuclear fusion? Fusion reactors will possibly be smaller, but in a fusion reactor, you need to have magnetic confinement of plasma in a tokamak kind of structure. How do you fit that into an Iron Man suit? So the engineering problems are extremely difficult. And that's why we're not able to have an Iron Man suit. You can have a battery, but then it won't produce the kind of power you want for Iron Man, right? A battery, silicon, lithium ion battery or sodium ion battery, whatever, it can't give the power you want. So, see, there are these massive engineering problems, which is why you can't have an Iron Man suit. And even if you have, let's say, a miniaturized fusion reactor, how will you fly around? You will need exhaust. What kind of fuel will you use for that? These questions, these practical questions, they are the reason why you can't build an Iron Man suit with a present day technology. Dheeraj Kamath says, Deepak Chopra was in the Epstein files. Yes, despicable man. I saw that 2-line email he sent to Jeffrey Epstein. What? God is a what? Artificial construct or something, but something about girls or something. Absolutely despicable man, Deepak Chopra. Charlatan. Okay. Kratos says, how Zoroastrian are Islam, Judaism, Christianity? They aren't Zoroastrian at all. Islam, Judaism, Christianity are the three Abrahamic religions. Zoroastrianism is not an Abrahamic religion. It is an Aryan religion. So it's part of a totally different family of religions. It has nothing in common with Islam, Judaism, Christianity. Judaism may have, to some extent, been inspired by Zoroastrianism, and I've discussed that in previous live streams, because the Jews, they were rescued by the Persian Emperor Cyrus when they were in captivity in Babylon, and Cyrus Kurush is the guy who rescued the Jews and allowed them to go back to Judea and Israel. And they were definitely influenced by Kurush, who was Cyrus Zoroastrian. That's the big question. Probably Cyrus was not Zoroastrian. If Zarathustra was born after the rule of Cyrus, then how does that work? Because before Zoroastrianism, Persia was Hindu. So yeah, so there is the possibility of some influence of Zoroastrianism on Judaism, but how much? Maybe to some extent. Died with Precaution says, US, not Australia, also are Russia's greatest conquerors. US, not Australia. US, not Australia, what? Also, are Russians greatest conquerors? The Americans are the Anglo-Saxons are the greatest conquerors. Okay, let's see. Okay. Uh, Anglo-Saxon population 1500. What was it? In 1500, 2 to 2.5 million. Okay, that's the Anglo-Saxon population. Anglo-Saxon population 2026. UK 69 million. What about the US? What about Australia? So in 1500, the Anglo-Saxon population was about 2 million. Today, it is well over 200 or 300 million. Imagine that. They are the greatest conquerors, not the Russians. Okay, Delulu Toons says, if Indian cricket team represents Sikh, Hindu, Muslim player as a India team, why can't Sikh, Muslim, and Christians live a normal life in India? I have no idea. I don't know. I don't. Krishan Bordoloy says, Yogi has suspended 68,000 babus. I've been at the start. Okay, I'm not aware of this, but okay. All right. Okay. Hari Sharma says, is super soldier serum possible like Captain America? I don't know. I haven't seen Captain America, so I don't know what happens in Captain America. Super soldier serum. You mean some kind of injection that makes you a superhuman? Like Spider-Man? Is it possible? I suppose some of these things could be possible. Various drugs are given, I suppose, to soldiers that make them more capable than regular people. I suppose it's possible, but I'm not sure to what extent like Captain America, because I haven't seen that. So, okay, V for Valor says, thank you for your efforts to bring out the truth. Thank you so much. You're most welcome. You're very welcome, and I do what I can. I try to play my role. Right. Thank you. Vipul Pawar says, where does semi-classical gravity first break down? Or semi-classical gravity? I only know of classical gravity. I mean, we have the Newtonian picture of gravity, and we have the Einsteinian picture of gravity. The Einsteinian picture of gravity is called general relativity. And where does that break down? It breaks down at the small scales. General relativity works at the large scales of the universe, not the macro scale of the universe. But it doesn't work at microscopic scales. There are experiments that have been performed to kind of figure out to what extent does gravity work at the smallest scales. For example, if you take dust particles, do they behave gravitationally the way you expect them to behave from a Newtonian perspective, for example? So what are the limits? The limits at the small scale of classical gravity is what people have tried to do. And it's very hard to do those experiments because the particles we're using are very small and so on. But what we know for sure is that this breaks down. Classical gravity breaks down at the quantum level, quantum domain, quantum scales, which is atomic and subatomic scales. We know it breaks down there. And we can see the breakdown in the Einstein field equation, the solutions of the Einstein field equations, which are those solutions, they give rise to singularities, which is the regions inside black holes. There is also ringularity and so on. But we'll talk about the Schwarzschild black hole. Inside at the core of the Schwarzschild black hole, we have a singularity, which is a region of infinite density, infinite curvature, which is non-physical. That's clear evidence that the equations have broken down. So it is the best theory we have, Einstein's general relativity, but it is flawed. It has a problem. And the problem is very visible in those singularities. So that is what I can tell you. I'm not sure about what other semi-classical gravity we have. I mean, Hawking's solution is semi-classical, right? Hawking's solution, which gives rise to Hawking radiation, is semi-classical. But yeah, that's what I can tell you. Okay, Vihang Khurana says, given Sanskrit's structured grammar, okay, one request, please stop taking super chats. I'm going to end it now, okay, very soon. So Vihang says, given Sanskrit's structured grammar and has system of encoding numbers and verses, could it have applications in modern cryptography? Why is knowledge in many Sanatana texts expressed in highly compact or encoded forms? There was a tradition. I'm not sure why the tradition was like that. I mean, tradition was that way. I mean, mathematical theorems are encoded in Sanskrit verses essentially, instead of representing them in terms of equations like we do today. And that was one of the reasons why it was a little hard for a lot of people to understand mathematics back in the day, I suppose. But Sanskrit grammar is extremely structured, incredibly versatile, incredibly simple as well as incredibly complex. You can encode riddles and numbers and equations and theorems in verses, right? You can encode you know algorithms for calculating pi in terms of verses, for example, pi, pi, and so on. So that's how it is. Can it have applications in modern cryptography? I'm not sure about that. Possibly, but I'm not sure. Why is knowledge in many Sanatan texts expressed in highly compact or encoded forms? I'm not sure why that was the case, but it was that way. Okay, please, once again, my request, please stop taking super chats. I need to stop this live stream in the next 10 minutes maximum. Okay, Aaron says, you said Indian education system is the reason why we have poor quality of people. Is there a country which has a good education model that we need to copy or create better people? How can we change the education system? Learn from Japan. One example is Japan. I'm not saying their education system is the best. It may not be very good at the higher levels, but Japanese kids, very little kids, are taught what civic sense is. They're taught not to litter. They are made to clean up their classroom every day, which is not like a very heavy exercise. It's just the practice of keeping your surroundings neat and tidy. They're taught how to behave. They're taught what is not acceptable, what kind of behavior is not acceptable, how to be dignified, how to be polite. Those things are taught to Japanese kids from the time they're very small, from the first year of schooling, essentially. So that's one example. The higher education system of Japan is pretty brutal. I'm not recommending that as a good example, but in the case of civic sense and all that, the Japanese education system does a tremendous job of instilling the right values and the right behaviors in little children. That's why the Japanese people are so polite, so dignified, and there's such incredible, impeccable civic sense in Japan. That's one example. How do we change the education system? You do it 1 year at a time, starting from the lowest nursery level. It will take you 20 years to revamp the entire system, but you do it. And listen, I have given the details in episode 28, whatever it is. You can check out my older episodes of Ask Abhijit, in which I've given all the details of what needs to be done. And now people are taking more and more super chats, which means this live stream will never end. Kratos says, please explain Aryan spread out of India to Europe and formation of Indo-European cultures, religion like Zeus, Thor, Perun, etc. So there was this battle that happened, the oldest battle recorded in human literature in the Rig Veda, the Battle of the 10 Kings, in which King Sudas defeated a coalition of more than 10 other kings, 10 other clans. They were defeated, and after the defeat, they were expelled out of India. That was the Aryan spread out of India into Central Asia, eventually to Europe. And they took various... Originally, they would have all spoken various forms of Sanskrit, but eventually they've spread out in various geographical regions, and then the languages evolved separately. That's why you have all the various Indo-European languages that spread out in the region. And then you had various Aryan gods being manifested in different forms. So Dios Pitru became Zeus Pater, became Jupiter, became Thor. But those gods encoded the elements in them of Indra, which is the hammer and the Vajra, hammer and the thunderbolt. So that's how it spread out. Abhirup Sarkar says, has Modi been under pressure to publicly congratulate an unsigned colonial trade deal? He was strategically silent for so long. I hope he gets it fine. Please understand the difference between words and actions. Modi sent out a tweet, a nice, polite tweet thanking Donald Trump. Modi has not signed any trade deal. What pressure? Obviously, he will be under American pressure to sign this trade deal. But he's not signing it. He's simply thanking Trump for being a nice person and blah, whatever. He's playing to Trump's ego. But he has not signed any deal. As long as the deal is not signed, I don't care what Modi says. Words don't matter. Actions matter. A signing of a trade deal is an action. Sending a tweet is words. I don't care about words. It's not important. Hani Sharma says, did you get a chance to see Tumbad? Not yet. I'll let you know when I see it. Thank you for the reminder, sir. Subhajit Karmakar says, how can a man get power without getting into politics? By creating your own private army of very highly trained, dangerous people. That's how you can get power without getting into politics. Otherwise, you need to get into politics. Or you need to be very well connected through various ways. There are multiple ways of getting it. But at the end of the day, power, what does it mean? The ability to enforce outcomes, the ability to compel outcomes. That obviously needs hard power. Okay, Tumbad is available on Amazon Prime. Thank you so much. Noted. Thank you. Krishant Bordoloy says, HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, removed from AMC private players. What are my thoughts? I don't know at this point what to think. I've not studied this in detail, exactly what's happened. Maybe the government wants private players to come into the picture, Larsen and Toubro, Tatas, or somebody else. I'm not sure. HAL doesn't have the best track record, so maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. I don't know at this point. I'll have to look into that. I've just heard the news of HAL being not part of the AMC thing in the future. We'll see about that. Maybe it's a good thing, perhaps. Maybe. Okay. This is the last for today. Dheeraj says, or you can run blackmailing scheme on the entire political class too. Are you suggesting something along the Epstein lines? Well, I'm not sure if it makes you really powerful. Maybe it makes you a tool of powerful people. Maybe you're not powerful, you're a tool of powerful people. Maybe that's what the role Epstein played. Epstein's role was not that of a powerful man. It was that of a man who was a tool of powerful people. Understand that. Yeah. Okay, that brings me to the end of all the questions for today. We have done almost 3.5 hours. So thank you so much, everybody. It was great fun. And I look forward to seeing you in Sunday's live stream, in which I'll take as many more questions as possible. So thank you so much for all the questions. It was great fun. Keep learning, keep asking questions. The only way to learn is to ask questions, and keep raising your standards. Don't lower your standards. Don't do that. Raise your standards, please. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.